Hi everyone, and welcome to the Courtauld's Big Draw Festival. It's so great to have so many of you here, and I'm sure a lot more people will drop in throughout the day. So this year is based on the theme A Climate of Change, and from art about living in the countryside and the different seasons, to stories and fairy tales, animals and plants are used by the artists in the Courtauld collection in many different ways. So today we are inviting you and your household to explore and get creative with your own habitat, materials you can find in your home, your garden, and also maybe your local area if you don't have a garden. So we want you to look at the oceans, rainforests, countryside, cities, and also habitats in danger. So I wanted to go through a little bit of housekeeping before we start. You can speak to us and ask any questions via the chat function on Zoom. I will send a message so you can all see where it is in a minute. All the activities today are suitable for anyone over 6 years old, but we ask that children are always supervised by an adult when taking part. You can look at and download the full programme via the email we sent you with the login details. Here you can find out more about the wonderful artists and experts we have today, as well as more details about what's in store for you during this event. Also the materials that you might need. Also a note to say that you can drop in and out of the event as you want by re-clicking on the link we sent you. So please do curate your own day how you feel. Lastly, we would really love to see everything you create today. So send any pictures you have to us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at CourtauldRes, or email them if you don't use social media to researchformevents@courtauld.ac.uk. So now we have a very exciting workshop by Usarae Gul to kick off the Big Draw Festival today. She's a British Pakistani artist based in London. So welcome, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Layla. Thanks. Okay, hi everyone, my name's Usarae Gul. Welcome to today's workshop. I'm going to be hosting creating mythological collaged creatures with you all today. So as the kind of work that I do, I like to look at sort of my Pakistani culture to create creatures, and often I like to look to the environment that I live in and things that I'm surrounded with for inspiration. And I think that it tied in really well with the current situation, in that a lot of us are spending a lot more time indoors and surrounded by our home much more than we usually would be. So I thought it's a really important time to kind of tap into your inner child and be really imaginative and think about things that you're surrounded with in a different light. So to start off, I've just, on your screen, you can see some examples of the kind of things that I create. And in the workshop, I'm going to look at and show you some of the things that I do to inspire myself to create strange mythological creatures. So to start off, I thought we'd actually look at some of the pieces from the Courtauld gallery itself. Fern, if you could change the slide, please. So this piece is called Adam and Eve, and it's by Lucas Carnac, and I thought this was a great one to look at for inspiration, just because of all of the different animals that you can see. I think I counted like 12 altogether, and I thought it was a good place to start off, just if you're in the city and you don't see like animals all the time. It's a nice sort of starting point. The next slide shows another piece that I thought could be an interesting one to look at. This is actually the Cassoni chest, which is a very elaborate chest. And I thought it was interesting how it's got the lion's feet, and it just, I kind of feel like I could imagine it walking about when you're not looking. And that was just to really encourage everyone to look at pieces of furniture differently. Often they just kind of blend into the background. But I thought it'd be fun to think about the personalities that your furniture might have, and what they might do when you're not looking. So the next slide is another interesting two pieces, if could, thank you so much. These are two pieces by Cézanne. And what I loved about these is how they seem to be like everyday moments that maybe if you were in the kitchen, you might just walk past a houseplant with some pears around it. And I thought it'd be really nice to look at your surroundings and sort of with a viewfinder lens and really hone in on certain details. And to encourage looking at food. It's a lovely natural thing, and the thing with food is every fruit and vegetable is different. And again, just really looking at them, not just as food, just as items as well, because you get lots of lovely textures and colours on fruit. So yeah, that's just a little start off, and then the next slide, I think, if you could change that. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about mythological creatures. So mythological creatures are creatures whose existence cannot be proved, and they've been around for a long, long time. I've got some examples here of an ancient Egyptian sphinx. In the top middle, and on the top right there's a minotaur. On the bottom left there's a beautiful Gond illustration from India. In the bottom middle is a depiction of the Loch Ness monster, and then I've got on the bottom left there's a dragon, and on the top left there is sort of the ancestors of a unicorn at the top there, so it's kind of like a deer with the single horn. So there's lots of examples: mermaids, the phoenix, sphinx. So a lot of the time these were totally made up just to make tales of old sound a little bit more exciting. And with us all being at home, I feel like we all need a little bit more excitement. So yeah, let's get on to making our own mythological creature. So one thing I want to really hone in and sort of tell everyone is that this is just for a little bit of fun and to sort of loosen up. I know a lot of the time in my everyday paintings I have quite tightly illustrated. I like to be true to what's in front of me, so I kind of use collage just to really free up a hand and to sort of lose the stiffness and to do something a little bit fun, just to open up sort of my imaginative ideas as well. So I'm expecting everyone to not have any fitted ideas of what you're going to produce by the end of this. And also it's half an hour, so I expect everyone to go on and carry on throughout the day. And this isn't by any means, you know, you don't have to finish your piece within the half an hour. So yeah, so these are some pieces that I did. There's a strange looking monkey. I was inspired by the numbers on a clock. And then the middle one was surprise, surprise, after a night of dominoes, and it's got its mug legs. And the one on the left is my DPD fruit, a bird, which I'd like to imagine is the person that delivers my deliveries. So yeah. First of all, just to get started, I think it'd be really great for everyone to take 5 minutes to choose 3 items in your house that you're going to incorporate into your mythological creature. And I think these are the items that you're going to draw. So they can be in any room of the house. If you can, you know, if you're feeling lazy, you don't want to move, and you can just see them from where you are. Just would like everyone to take 5 minutes to choose 3 items that you want to draw. So I'm just going to start a quick timer now, and we'll meet you back here in 5 minutes. That's wonderful. Great, everyone. So that's our 5 minutes up, and I feel like I can see lots of messages coming in, and everyone's got their 3 items. I'm going to share my 3 items. If you've not chose yours yet, don't worry, you can carry on, and then I'll move on to the next part now. So I've chosen an orange. Actually, no, that's a clementine. Forgive me for my mistake. And that's got, just for the lovely round shape and how it's got loads of tiny little dots on it when I look closer. And I have this lovely brass dish, which sort of I put my keys in just near the front door, and I really liked it just for the shape and the pointy bits and how shiny it is. And I chose some hand sanitizer gel, which I feel everyone's probably got lurking around quite nearby these days. So I just want everyone to kind of, if you can, hold your items and really feel the different textures and try and think, where could I incorporate this into my mythological creature? Where, what part of the mythological creature would this be? Is my creature going to be swimming? Is it going to fly? Really try and think out the box and maybe think of different parts of your creature, and maybe take apart your objects. They don't necessarily have to be the shape that they are. And what I think would be a really good starting point for everyone is to arrange your items in front of you, and with a sort of a pencil and a paper, whatever you've got to draw with really, is sketch out the outline of your mythological creature. So I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes to sketch out sort of the bare bones, don't worry about details, and to just really just be free with it and juggle the 3 objects together. And so, yeah, let's do that for the next 5 minutes. I'm just going to put the timer on now. I'm going to be doing this as I go along just because I love this kind of thing. If you have any questions, please just shoot a message. I am trying to read them as I go along. A kiwi in a cork little jar. Oh, these are so exciting. As you're drawing, I'd like everyone to add in eyes to their mythological creature. Remember, they don't necessarily have to be on its face. It's just totally made up. It can be topsy-turvy. It doesn't have to make sense. So we've just got 1 more minute. Just to show you what I've done, so I've got my brass bowl as the face, and then I've got the bottom of my hand sanitizer gel as its body, and I've got the orange as the wheel, because I imagine he wheels around. My mythological creature wheels around. Try and think of a name for your creature as well. I think it'd be really nice to sort of think of a personality, maybe what's its superpower. Okay, so that's everyone's 5 minutes up. So now the next part is, so if you've just got a pen and pencil and you've not got any collage bits, don't worry, you can just keep adding onto your creature. But I've collected a load of sort of bits and bobs around my house to collage with. I've got an envelope, I've got sweet wrappers. Oh, that smells smell of chocolate. I've got old wrapping paper, I've got leaflets, and now I think it'd be really great if everyone, if you've got bits to tear them up and add them to your creature. I've got a Pritt stick here as well to glue down the pieces. You can use scissors, but I quite like to tear just because I like the feeling of tearing up paper, and I quite like the rough edges, and just glue them onto your mythological creature. I'm just going to give everyone another 5 minutes to add onto your creature, and then we're going to add some extra details on with any colouring tools you've got, whether it be pencils, paints, felt tips, oil pastels, anything. Yes, you can use the object more than once, absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit far away from my laptop, so I sometimes miss the messages. So as we said before, don't worry if you're not finished by the end of this. This is the start of your mythological creature fully forming. And I'm just going to go ahead and sort of fill in the gaps. It'd be really lovely to know where everyone is tuning in from as well. If everyone wants to type in where they're signing in from, that'd be really interesting to know. Anywhere. Oh, Manchester, London, Bethnal Green, London. Croydon. Oh, so lots of Londoners. Glasgow, Isle of Man, wow. Brighton. East Finchley, Doncaster. Rutland, Carshalton. This is a really great way to recycle as well. If you're like me, I'm a bit of a hoarder. And it just goes to show that anyone can collage. You don't have to have lots of fancy art materials. You don't have to, yeah, anyone can do this. Wow, Melbourne, Australia, Dublin, Hove, Sussex. Thank you so much for joining this morning. I really appreciate it. It's I can't wait to see what everyone's doing and what you're creating. I'm just going to throw a spanner in the works and ask everyone to add wings onto their creature. Remember, they don't have to be how you know wings or in any particular place. Because I think around about now, I think everyone would love to have a pair of wings. Even if you could just do a quick sort of fly around the block. Tokyo, wow. Columbia kind of vibe. Amazing. Montrose, wow. So I'm going to be carrying on making my creature because I'm seeing that the time is sort of catching up with us. I'm nowhere near finished, and I expect a lot of people aren't. So if you'd like to share later on in the day your finished pieces or what you've managed to do so far, that would be so lovely to see. So I'm aware that we've got about 5 minutes left. What I thought was quite interesting is that you can get mythological monster name generators online, and I might just fire some names at people to sort of inspire you a little bit more. Legendary creature name generator. I often do this just to inspire myself as well. If I'm feeling like, you know, I'm stuck at home, I've not been able to go to galleries or museums as much, I like to sort of type in name generator, and obviously just it just sort of gives you a bit of a cue sometimes, and you know, you come across a word that you might not necessarily read or just see. So I've got some mythological creature names to fire away at everyone. A gull mop. I'm imagining some sort of mop that kind of cleans your kitchen floor when you're not looking. A lamtu. I'm finding, I think I'm just looking for objects in the name, so I imagine a lamp. Oh, that's so lovely to hear that your children are enjoying the creative process. A Janan tea. Could that be a magical tea that when you drink it, you turn into a mythological creature? A boggin. A coffil. Okay, I'm going to generate some more names. Maybe you can make your own names up. A unichop. A tarragig. A kegri. Chuyuth. Wonder what language your mythological creature speaks. And what superpower it has. I think mine is able to teleport. Oh, someone's mythological creature speaks French. Objicon is my mythological. I like that. Sounds very strong, almost. Wushontal mouse. I've created a corrupted face. I'll share what I create at the end. I'll share it on my Instagram, and I'll share it with the Courtauld team. I'm not going to share it just now. No cheating. Right, I think we're wrapping up. Like I said, I would love to see what everyone carries on doing. There's no right or wrong answers. Think freely, be imaginative. There's no set way of what your mythological creature looks like. And what could be really interesting is thinking about the story behind your mythological creature. What is the myth? And yeah, I hope this workshop helped you sort of get out of your head a little bit and sort of see the things around you in a different place. In a different way. So yeah, that's I think that's the end of my workshop. It's so nice to have you all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so great. I can't wait to see what everyone's made as well. And thank you for everyone for joining in the chat as well. That's great. So if anyone's just tuning in, you'll see that everyone's talking on the chat. So please send any questions through to us via that, and also send us your finished works via social media at Courtauld Res. Another thing is, if you are younger, please remember to always have an adult with you when taking part today. So next up, I am delighted to introduce Aurelia Lange and her workshop Exploring Movement with Mark Making. Aurelia is an artist and illustrator based in Berlin. So thank you, Aurelia, for joining us, and I will hand over to you to get started. And I'll get you to start your video as well.
Cool.
Hi.
Hi, Lila. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for joining us again. Are you all ready to go?
Yeah, totally.
Great.
Today, we're going to explore movement in our drawings with mark making, and with the theme of animals in the environment. I thought it was a really nice opportunity to have a look at some animals. If we could go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a still photograph by Edward Muybridge of a pigeon in flight that was created by new technology in 1887 with a really fast shutter speed, the first fast shutter speed that was able to record the movement of animals and humans. He has a really wonderful book called Animal Locomotive, which is just full of images of these stop frame paths of the movement of different animals. And I thought today would be really nice to kind of challenge our perceptions of sometimes it's quite easy to think of an animal and draw what we sort of assume stance it would be in, and actually drawing is a complete interpretation of a moment in time, and everything is moving around us all the time, and I find it really fascinating to explore that. So the next slide should be some examples. Some examples of my drawings and studies. I wanted to talk to you through them a little bit. The one on the left of the chicken is just a very quick sketch from watching a video of a chicken. I think there's something really nice about working quite fluidly and trying to sort of play a game of drawing from something moving in front of you creates these sort of lines where you have to work quickly. And I think by interpreting your drawing in that way, it can sometimes take the pressure off the outcome. It can be a game where you're not, you can be curious about what happens in the end result. And I also work a little bit in animation and quite enjoy bringing the characters back to life from drawing from movement. And this moving, sort of running, walking pheasant, I wanted to share with you because I think it's quite a nice example to identify the different extensions that some animals have in terms of the things that the textures that they have, whether they have feathers or fur or flappy things, wings, that would come to life when it takes these movements on. So I thought that would be nice to share. And we also have we go back one more, the robin in flight at the bottom is a study of a robin, which may or may not be apparent to you straight away. But I think there's something really nice in trying to interpret movement with just lines, and I particularly like the one on the right hand corner because it just feels like a kung fu robin. You can kind of imagine it like flying, like landing that way. But so there's some examples I wanted to share. So the next slide, please, Layla. So I'd like us to do an activity together. I'm going to stick with the feathered friends of ours. And you can either follow me in that sense, or you can choose another animal. And I have a little easel set up here so we can kind of do it together. But the first thing I like to think about when drawing is to deconstruct everything think of everything as lines and shapes. So how we can kind of bring these elements together to make something. And I thought maybe as an example, we could deconstruct this chicken in the same way. And you can see that, maybe you can go. So I have the same example here you can see on the slides. I'm sure we need to see it twice. But, so I think what I'll do is just explore with a pen, if you have a pen or a pencil handy, just to kind of get a sense of the shape of the animal. So you just have a circle for an eye. The beak is either, you can just make it a triangle, just like a squirrel. And then we've got the
sort of crown, and then body. And I think this is just a sort of sketch exercise. It's just quite nice to kind of think about how your line like moves across the page and starts to build this shape. And it literally is just lines and shapes. So think of its legs. It's got these sort of like dinosaur, let me see this, okay. Dinosaur feet. And I think something about thinking about movement in your drawings, although your actual animal might not be particularly like running or whatever at the moment, but I think is about the movement you have in your movement of the line making, if that makes sense. And I think that's something that is a really nice thing to include in your drawing, is to kind of almost think of your pencil or pen as like an instrument that you're playing, and it's just these like brush strokes. So with the rooster, you have maybe like different directions of the feathers that bring these things up, start to like build your animal. So say we have this as a structure. I hope this is okay and going clear. This is my first time doing this. So yeah, and then the next part of the exercise is I'd quite like you to use this as a starting point. And in the material descriptions, I mentioned it would be nice to use ink. And I have just some Indian ink here, just in a jam jar. I'm just using the jam jar lid. Maybe I can do this actually. You can see there's like a jam jar lid with the ink in. And I'm not actually using a paintbrush or anything actually today. I've just sort of collected items around the house. Let me just see. Okay, yeah. Sorry, just checking the comments. Okay, so we've got some different drawing materials that I've just found from around the house. So don't ever feel like that you need to go to an art shop and buy like the expensive paintbrushes and things. My favorite is actually just to use a piece of card broken in half, right, and folded in half. And you can see the different like mark makings that these can make. And with this way, you can kind of use it thicker, thinner, and it also takes a little bit of the expectation out, because sometimes you get these really nice marks that surprise you. I think that's really important in your drawing. This is a piece of egg box. Also absorbs the ink slightly differently. It's like a sort of pulp. So maybe there's like, it's quite similar to the card, but again, different textures. Some dried rosemary, again. Maybe a thinner line. You can use the ends of the herb to make these sort of scratchy marks, textures. Matchstick, and we have cotton bud, which absorbs the ink slightly differently, so it's a little bit softer on the paper. And this actually, I was just looking around the house this morning, and this is the bottom of a spring onion. But I really love the roots, and yeah, they make some really interesting marks, you can see. So this is your palette that you can choose from, your brush set. Yeah, so now we can approach our drawing with the ink. So again, I think what I'll do with this guy is maybe isolate some of the parts of the animal that like maybe doesn't have the same extension. So just in the face, like this, give myself a bit more space. So give me a personality, maybe like. And it's just interesting to think how like adding just certain extra marks like can change the personality so much of the cockle. Yeah, like a tiny beak. It doesn't have to look like this. This is just an example of how you can use it to guide you for drawing. So I'm going to go with some of the card. And again, I'm going to take a bit of a deep breath and try and do this in just one stroke and see what happens. And I really urge you to just yeah, have a go and not worry too much about it looking the same. Like every drawing is like a different sort of creature being born. So now his extension is that way. It's got really tiny beaks. Maybe doesn't look quite. Maybe I'll make his beak a bit bigger. I can just go over it. Quite funny. And I think the thing is, it's like when you're making like drawings of animals or people or characters, like I sort of enjoy just the idea of like meeting these characters as much as creating them. They're not like necessarily, let me put this here. You're kind of giving birth to these creatures, but they're just as interesting to you to meet. And yeah, you're kind of the author, but you also just don't have a sort of big ego over it either. And we can use these ones, maybe the rosemary to create a bit of the feathers. These textures. It's quite magic at the moment. And then maybe get like a wider part of the and if your ink is feeling a bit dry on the page, you can add water. Have a little bit just to wash it down. It's got this like big extension. And I think as well, something that's really nice to think about when you're thinking of textures around what your animal like encompasses is the direction of like maybe where the feathers are going. I would recommend using the direction of the way you draw. So they're coming away from the body. It feels more natural to create the same direction as your mark making. Quite a mad chicken. Maybe I'll go back in with the pen. Kind of looks a bit worried, maybe. We can kind of change that. Maybe I've made it more worry looking. There you have one. I think if your animal is standing still in its environment, it's kind of important to think about like how it sort of exists in context. So at the moment, I think this guy has background it's placed in. You can see it's very well. Number one. Okay, and now I think what I wanted you to do today in terms of thinking about like this character that you've created for whatever animal you've chosen to do is to think about doing it many times and thinking about how this can look from like different angles or like different behaviors or different moods. So we can go again. And yeah, sorry, I hope this is, I'm not really asking many questions on the chat, but it would be great to know if you are drawing any other animals or if you're drawing along, or if you'd like to see this particular rooster, chicken character do something in particular. We can move it on. I think it's quite nice to think about it from different angles. I did this workshop with a good friend of mine who's 5. And before we started drawing, we started thinking about all of the different things a chicken could do and what it might look like if it was jumping or screaming or running. And we actually found it really fun to sort of act these things out and think about like how that might feel for the character. So if that is something that also can bring inspiration to your creations, I highly recommend it. And it also can really help. And I think if you're interested in animation, I think it's like actually a really natural thing that you'll find yourself doing is sort of acting all the movements out to understand how it will feel to do that. That sounds a bit strange, but let's develop this guy. So I'll pop him over here, or her, or he, okay. And let's think about how this guy can run. Let's make him run. So maybe, sorry, okay. So maybe we could go, maybe its head would kind of go further down. Maybe it's like running away, I don't know. It's, I don't actually know what they're called, the flappy things on the top of their head. Kind of be alert. Give it an expression. And we can give him some speed. And we can just basically make lines that go fast. Go faster lines. Thinking about the shape of its body. And how using the different mark makings, you've got many lines in one, basically, which can give the approach of movement. How its feet might look. Some dinosaur feet. And how maybe it just needs like a suggestion in terms of its in terms of the other body parts. You don't have to like draw everything. It can just be like a big suggestion. Oh, I'm reading the comments now. Dancing, flap its wings. Okay, let's get its wings up. Okay. I mean, it's pretty expressive right now. I hope it's okay. Just having a good time. And I think the lovely thing about inks is that you can just work super happy like that, quicker. You can like go over your drawings, you can be loose, and you can generate quite a lot in a short amount of time. And I think in that sense, it's really nice because it's a continuous exploration, and you can kind of like build on your drawings as you go. My 6 and 8-year-old are drawing cats and a chicken so far. They're trying strokes with pipe cleaner and toilet roll cardboard. Cool. So good. Well, the other suggestion I also had in terms of bringing your drawings to life is if you're happy to continue exploring. I have some other examples here of pre-drawings of the rooster. So we've got the rooster you saw, and then thinking about how it might look from behind, so you, like where the tail is facing you and how the feet might be facing away. Some more sketches of how the rooster might look with its like chest puffed out and screeching. This is quite an abstract looking one, but this is the rooster's head sort of like scratching itself. So how the sort of different shapes can be conveyed. But yeah, I'm realizing we're 10 minutes away. So I just wanted to also share the extension of this workshop as well well, I had this idea, which I don't think we had much time to finish here, but if you're interested in continuing your exploration of a character, you can make them into a thermotrope, which I think Leila, the next slide actually has an example. Oh, and I'm also sorry, I'm just reading the comments as well. The specific ink, I'm just using black Indian ink. Yeah, I'm using black Indian ink, which is just like quite common ink you can just get from the art shop. Also know that Charlotte later today is showing people how to make their own inks, which look amazing. So I also recommend watching her workshop for that. And yeah, I just wanted to talk you through this exercise, if it's something that might interest you to continue, where you can create a thermotrope, which is basically like a 2-frame animation, like analog animation, by drawing your characters on just a circle of card or like not too thin paper, and you need to draw your character twice. On the slide that's currently showing is one that me and my friend Walker made the other day of a chicken flapping its wings. You kind of have to watch the GIF a few times to get it, perhaps. But basically, you create your character on a circle of card. I just drew around a plate, and then you have 2, and then you want to. So this is for your second one. You want to put them back to back. So they're actually facing, one's facing up and the other is facing on the other side down. So that when you flip your character, when you're looking at it, they're facing the same way. And then all you need to do is use some sellotape. I think we used a chopstick for his, or a long pencil, and you just stick the pencil in the middle of your 2 drawings. And I just stuck like on the insides with sellotape, and we sort of glued the edges so that it sort of stayed straight. And then you can just like twist it in front of your eyes and sort of see your character come to life. And your character is a 2-frame animation, so it could just be 2 drawings used with slightly different ink materials, like brushes that you've created, to give that sense of being and movement within your drawing. Yeah, so I've left the notes here, which if you're able to screenshot, or I think they'll be recorded, or we can share them if anyone wants them as like a later reference. But we had a lot of fun doing that the other day, and also filming it and then using those sort of that footage to give us ideas. So yeah. Wondered if there were any more questions. Where are we? Okay, Aurelia is using everyday objects. Yeah, I'd love to see other things that you find around the house and any of the drawings you've made today. I can see my mum's comments in the thing. And it was really great to see how many people are logged in from all over. It's really amazing.
Thank you so much. That was so great. Yeah, I'm sure that lots of people have made really wonderful drawings today. So we've asked them to send them over on social media to tag you and us. So we're at Courtauld Res. And if people don't have social media, don't worry, you can email them at researchforumevents@courtauld.ac.uk, and we can share them with you afterwards so you can see what everyone's made. And
Cool.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us. It was great.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Thanks.
it was nice to share. Okay.
Speak to you later. Bye. So next up, we have the amazing Kathryn Poole with us to her workshop, Exquisite Animals. Kathryn's practice attempts to capture and illustrate memories. So thank you for joining us, Kathryn. I can see you there. If it's okay with you, I will pass it over and let you get started.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, thank you, Lee. Yeah, so this is the workshop we're going to be doing today with me is called Exquisite Animals, and it's going to be a drawing workshop based on the Exquisite Corpse kind of drawing exercise. So an exquisite corpse is an assemblage of words or images like we've got on screen, and each participant or each collaborator adds to this composition that we're going to create in sequence. So the one on the left, I've got a drawing of a fish, and then I sent it to my friend Heather Chow, and she completed the other half of the drawing, and she did another fish on the other side. The central one I did just by myself. So I drew a beetle head. I think the middle bit, I can't remember what that was, but the bottom bit is some mushrooms. And then the third one is a piece of coral with some gull wings and some tentacles. So they're all slightly different styles. The central image is what we're going to do first. The first image on the left is what we're going to do second, and the one on the end is what we're going to do last. I've put them in a fantastic order on screen. So if we switch back to the camera, and then I'll just start. So the first thing we're going to do is the 3. So we need our pieces of paper, 1 piece of paper per participant. If you're working by yourself, that's fine. Just do what I do and draw by yourself. A piece of paper, fold it into 3. It doesn't have to be exact, just rough. We just need it separated. And then once it's done, we can begin, and I'll switch to my other camera. So I have reference images of animals, and I've also prepped some parts for myself. So I have a middle part and a bottom part ready for different ones. And I think I have a top as well. This first part, we're all going to draw the head together. So any sort of drawing material you prefer to use. I'm going to use a pen because I think that's what you'll be able to see. And we're all going to, on the top part of our folded piece of paper, so we've got our fold, we're going to draw the head. I'm going to draw a beetle because that's what I like to draw. So if you have any questions about if I've not explained it properly, please send them in the chat. So I've got a nice image of a stag beetle, and I got this image. You can't see it, but it's what I'm drawing from. The Museum of Liverpool has an incredible collection of taxidermied animals, and yeah, you can draw whatever you want. You don't have to draw what I'm drawing. I'm just drawing my favourites. I don't think I'll be able to share it because it's on a different computer at the minute. But if you even just draw from your imagination as well, if you can, I thought it might be a nice idea to think of animals that are local to you. So I know that you can get these I'm not sure whether you can get this species, but you can get stag beetles in the UK. And I'm just going to quickly do it. I forgot to put my timer on. I forgot to say we're going to do this for 2 minutes, and then we're going to switch, and then we're going to do the middle part for 2 minutes, then we're going to switch, and then the bottom part for 2 minutes, and then we're going to have a look at what we've drawn. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to give you a sort of idea of this new creature that you could have created. I'll do a little bit of shading. Get some tone to sort of demonstrate some form. And you can draw however it's comfortable for you, and think of it as an exercise rather than a perfect finished drawing. So I think he's got some little fiddly bits up here and some antennae. And you'll see as I work on this and on the other sheets that my little brother has helped me by prepping some central parts so that I get a nice surprise when it's finished. But he's not an artist, so he's quite self-conscious about his drawing skills. But I think it's important that if you enjoy drawing, you draw regardless of whether you think you're good or not. I've got some more little antennae here. And on this side, I'm trying not to put my hand in the way so that you can see what I'm doing. It's got some little fronds here. This game, it's a game really, and it's really fun to do with friends. That image I showed you before of the fish was a project me and Heather did where we posted them back and forth to each other. Whoops, stop. So that's our time up for that one. So if we finish our head, we've got to stop now and then fold that over so that the next person can't see it and they can start working on the central bit. So if I get the sort of torso area ready, so the head's already completed, pass it to the next person so the next person can work on it, or just fold it over and you yourself can work on it. And let's see what I'm going to draw for the torso. Was going to be, I think I'm going to draw a bat, because that's a nice British animal as well that you get quite a lot, quite endangered as well. The one I'm going to do is a whiskered bat. And now I need to make sure that, oh God, he hasn't done the lines. So if you've done the top part, when you do it, just pop a little line there and there, wherever the image ends, so that the next person knows where to continue. So I'll try, I've just made that up, it probably won't link. So I'm going to start now, let's go. So we do, it's got a big fuzzy middle bit. And we're going to have to do really tiny wings. So you can probably see that I'm not being very precious about it. A chicken gecko bunny, that sounds incredible. Not being very precious. I'm just sort of getting my ideas down. And then you can use these sketches as they are, or you can work into them, or you can use them as preparatory materials for more detailed and more developed drawings. Oh my God, this is going to look the tiniest wings possible for a bat. How is it going to fly? And I don't know whether I said, but this one is a whiskered bat. And I found this one, I think, at the Bristol Museum. So if you're interested in drawing animals and you want to study them, it's actually very hard to draw them from, you know, the real animals, unless they're like my cat and they sleep for like 20 hours of the day. So I find it very useful to either work from specimens at museums. Uh-oh, I'm running out of time. Or from photographs, but even then you've got to be really lucky to catch the animal in a good position. And lots of museums have fantastic collections of all sorts of different animals. Quick. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not my best work. So 2 minutes are up. So the central section is finished now. A stag beetle, vampire bat and lizard. You know, I think I actually might be doing lizard for the bottom part as well. So central section is finished. If you fold that over, I'm going to try and do that without looking so I don't see it. And you want to do it just so that you can see the bottom part, and then pass it to the next person and let them work on the bottom. And by the time we finish, we should have 3 really good drawings. So I've got the bottom ready and I'm going to get my image ready. What was I going to do for this one? Oh, I remember. Barn owl feet. Fox, 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 fox. I haven't got a picture of a fox, although I do love them. So we'll get ready and we're gonna go. 2 minutes. So barn owl feet this time. Usually if I was doing a proper drawing, I would sketch out in pencil first, but I think it's a really good idea when you're loosening up and when you're practicing to draw with pen, because you can't rub it out. So every mark you make is permanent and you have to commit to the marks you make. And it gives you really interesting results. Oh, I love a good barn owl. We have some on my commute to work. There's some really beautiful ones that I see very occasionally in the fields nearby. And they fly over and they have some very sharp talons. Oh, I'm a very slow drawer usually, so these timed exercises, they really force you to move very fast. And we've got a minute left. I've gone too big. 40 seconds. So we need to do the other foot. This one is ringed actually, but I can't quite see what it says. There's a man who occasionally appears in Liverpool city centre. I think he runs an owl rescue and you get to hold the owls. So I got a lovely picture with it. I think he has other sort of birds of prey as well. I've seen him with a kestrel and it's very exciting. It's always a good day when he appears in town. Whoop, we're done. Right, I'm going to cheat and just quickly give it some talons. Right, so we've got all our 3 top, middle and bottom done. So now we can do the reveal. So we might as well do this one that I've done. So I forgot that this one had an owl head. So the top part is I drew I prepared an owl yesterday. Second part I think is some sort of, I don't know, insect creature that my younger brother has done, and it's got some nice owl legs. So once they're created like this, you can start thinking about how would these animals actually function. You see how important those little lines are to show where it goes. But how would these animals sort of survive in the wild or survive in their environments? How would they function? Oh, I like this one. That one's very creepy looking. I like that. So we've got a stag beetle head. This is it's called Acrididae. So I only know the scientific name. I don't actually know the non-scientific name. And I believe that's my kitty cat's body. So now that this exercise is over, what I'd like to try and do now is that sort of fish kind of drawing. So we only need 1 piece of paper. We need to do send all your creations. Yes, please share them. I'd love to see what you've made, especially from what I've seen in the chat. But yeah, just 1 piece of paper and we're going to work on 1/2 each. So if there are 3 of you, just split it between, you know, 1 person works with 1 person and 1 person works with the other person. If there's 1 of you, just do what I would do and draw it with myself. So I know that my brother has prepped something for me. So he's prepped me a little octopus, I think. And then I'm going to draw, I think, a crab. So we are allowed to see what we're drawing here, and I'm going to give you, I think I said 3 minutes each half. So 3 minutes to draw 1/2 and then swap over with your partner, and 3 minutes for the other half, but I will just keep drawing for those extra 3 minutes. So on our marks, get set, go. I have to spin this around, I think. So let's see. I'm gonna do a little dotted outline actually, because this is quite complicated. So if you're working in pen, this is quite a good idea. Do your own connect the dots, because then you haven't committed to a line completely. But yeah, like I was saying, I use this as an exercise to think of how would this animal survive, because each part of the animal, they evolve for a specific purpose. So like the bat wings and the talons on the owl, those talons are used to, you know, collect prey. They don't want them to escape, so they're very sharp and they're very powerful. So how would that work with that weird insect creature that we created? And that incredibly long-necked animal that we made with the insect bodies. How would that survive? What would it live on? Would it be a herbivore? Would it be an omnivore? Would it be a carnivore? So, keep drawing these legs. I could have just sketched it in pencil really, but I didn't think. Okay, now we can start on the fun bit. So it has a little eye. I can't remember where I found this crab, possibly Manchester Museum. I just travel around the country's museums to look at their taxidermy exhibits, so that it's a strange existence, I know. But I think because of the sort of massive collections that all of the different museums were acquiring in the 18th century, regional museums like Liverpool and Manchester do actually have really, really fantastic collections of stuff like this. I'm gonna, a little bit of, I might do a bigger, some shading. And then we want some more here. So you've got half a minute left on this half. Sorry, I'm not being very good with the time and I get too distracted by the drawing. And it's quite nice and novelly. I wish I was working in colour because it's a beautiful red, this crab. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, done. So if you guys switch over now, or if you're working by yourself, you make a start on the other half, and then we'll set up for another 3 minutes. So on your marks, get set, go. And I'll try and quickly draw these legs in, because I know I'm not going to have a lot of time to get them all done. Boop, 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 boop. And then keep sharing what animals you're actually using for this part, because it's quite interesting to see your combinations. Similar to the barn owl, the crab has very powerful claws. Again, because it's a carnivore, another carnivorous animal. And then all these knobbly bits. So this part here, this second part, is my younger brother. He gave me a hand, so he did a little squid for me, or an octopus, just so that I had something to work from. 1.5 minutes left. Can't remember which leg I'm on. And like I say, this is, again, similar to this first ones. It's just a creative exercise. It doesn't have to be a perfect image. It just has to spark some ideas and sort of, or even just has to be a little game that you do to have fun. Because I always find that, especially over the recent months, it's been a really nice distraction to just draw, to just think about nature, to think about animals and not think about anything else. To just have fun. Spent a lot of time in my garden looking at the animals, paying attention to what birds are nearby, paying attention to, you know, the amount of wildlife that exists in our own back gardens or in our own sort of local areas. And I'll do the last leg in the last 30 seconds. So Heather has got a Queen Alexandra bird wing with stag beetle fusion for this one. That sounds beautiful. And quick bit of shading for the last 15 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, sorry, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cool. So hopefully we'll have finished this bit. I didn't really do this properly because I should have done something down here to connect this. There we go. But so hopefully we should have something really interesting. And fortunately we've both gone for sea creatures with this one. But I imagine it reminds me a little bit of when they collect the shells, sort of hermit crabs and things like that, but you've got an octopus inside the shell instead. So that's our second exercise done. And now the last one is going to be a freestyle one. We work by ourselves. We don't need to have a partner for this one. And we're just going to try and think of a silhouette of an animal. So I've gone with sort of squirrel silhouette, and try and think about what parts could you combine to create that silhouette. So like with my jellyfish one that I showed you the image of at the start, so I used the jellyfish silhouette, but I used the coral head and the gull wings and the tentacles from a squid or an octopus maybe, and I combined those to create the jellyfish. So I'm going to do the squirrel body itself, but I'm going to give it a snake head. So you think a little bit of what you want to do for this, and then we'll combine those parts and we'll see what we create. I'm going to sketch in pencil first, and then we'll give ourselves, let's have a look at the time. What should we give ourselves? We'll give ourselves 6 minutes. 6 minutes. And we should be able to do a more complex drawing this time, or at least a more thought out drawing. So on our marks, get set, go. And then I'll just get my snake head. Where's it gone? Okay, I've got my squirrel body. So I'm just going to quickly sketch. I don't know whether you'll be able to see this because it's pencil and I draw quite lightly in pencil, but I'm just giving myself that silhouette. Very quick sketch. I'm just using shapes. So that's how I tend to construct images to begin with. It's just rough geometric shapes, and then I can fill out the details later. Oh, I could have done something fun with the tail. I might do something fun with the tail. I might give it a snake tail. So I've got that body shape. I'm going to stick this lovely head on. I'm not quite sure what snake it is. It's a big one, so I think it's a python. Again, this was from a lovely exhibit at the museum, so it doesn't have to be the museums I've been to, but that you should definitely visit them, definitely see what they've got going on. And if they let you, take pictures of the stuff in there, because you never know what ideas it will spark. Got a little snaky tongue. This was an exhibition all about snakes, so they had the specimens everywhere in really fantastic display cases. So I'm all sketched out, and now I'm going to start, and we've got 4.5 minutes left. Oh god, it took me a minute to do the sketch. I do love animals. So what's my favourite animal? Currently my favourite animal is my own cat. But I love birds. Most of the animals that I draw are birds. So herons are a particular favourite. I really love pigeons. I like seagulls. I know they're not everybody's favourite, but I really enjoy seagulls. There was a bunch of seagulls trying to get into a kebab the other day. So I opened it for them because I thought, go on then. Yeah. So I'm very fond. I'm fond of animals that other people would consider pests, actually. A lot of my work revolves around that. So rats and things like that I think are very lovely. I think I don't think there's many animals that I don't like. I'll even tolerate spiders and creepy crawlies as long as they don't touch me. Although earwigs, I'd prefer not to be in the same room or vicinity or anything like that to earwigs. Oh, this is not my best drawing, but I'm going for it. We've got 3 minutes left. So don't try and do all of the detail on it. Try and gesture it almost. Try and just hint at some of the drawing. So I'm hinting at the scales here, just a couple of square marks to indicate that there would be scales. But I'll have to leave it at that because otherwise I'll run out of time and I won't finish the squirrel part. So I'll quickly switch back to the squirrel. When I'm doing my proper drawings, when I'm doing if you saw some of them at the start, they're pointillist drawings. They are done with just a uni-pin pen. So the uni-pin pens are like £1 or £2. They're very, very cheap. These I bought myself like a little variety box of different Japanese pens. So let's see what people are saying. Badgerfish, chicken. I do love badgers. Red pandas or kitty cats, yes. All animals apart from creepy crawlies. Otters are lovely. I've never seen an otter in real life, actually. I'd love to see one. I have seen herons in real life. We've got like, I dislike slugs. I dislike slugs when they're in my house, which they tend to do. They tend to get in through all the holes. Or they have a fiesta at the bottom of the garden. You have to be careful where you're walking in the middle of the night. But I'm okay with them. See, I understand that everything has a part to play, even if they're gross. Oh, this is looking like some sort of creepy koala. Don't know what I've done. We've got 1 minute and 10 seconds left. I'm looking forward to showing my brother what I've done to his creations on the other half. They have parties in your chardo. I bet that's annoying. I lost a complete batch of tomatoes to them. What did I say? I'll mess with the tail. We'll go with back to the snake and we'll give it a nice big fat python tail. And I'll quickly try and indicate some lovely diamond pattern. It's not very diamond, but we've got 15 seconds left. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No. Right, time's up. I'm a big old cheater, me. So hopefully we've created a wonderful, beautiful looking new animal. Not one that you really wouldn't want to meet outside in the dark, clinging to your trees. And I hope, if you please share with me or share with the Courtauld everything else you've created today. I would love to see it. I really love doing this exercise with other people. So we've got some absolutely bonkers stuff, I think, on my half at least. This is my favourite. These two are my favourites. I'm looking forward to showing my brother. So if I just switch back to, I think, yeah, if you share everything and let me know what you've created, that would be fantastic. And like I said before, try and do it with other people. You could turn it into a postal project if you can't meet any of your friends or any of your family at the minute. Maybe send them some letters and send them half a drawing and tell them they've got to join in. So that's what I do with Heather, and we really enjoy it. I hope that was okay.
Great, thank you so much, Kathryn. And I'm sorry about our bit of tech fail at the beginning. That's our fault.
No,
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It's great to hear everyone's favourite animals as well. And I just want to show everyone, because I just said in the chat how much I love seals. And this is my prized possession, the seal cushion that I got from Alex, who's actually joining in today. So yeah, thank you so much, Kathryn. It's great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Great, so now we have a slightly different 45 minutes for everyone. I'm delighted to introduce Rachel Sloan, who is our Assistant Curator of Works on Paper here at the Courtauld. And today she's going to take us through about 5 works on paper that are housed in our collection, which show animals in their habitat. Rachel is virtually opening up our prints and drawing study room, and we hope that you can take the opportunity to get up close and personal with these rarely seen works on paper. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. Although I must admit, it does feel really weird sharing drawings from the gallery's collection from my kitchen rather than from the study room.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah. So what I'll do is I will pass it over to you, and if people just want to put all their questions in the chat, and I'll collect them, and then I'll jump in after each work and just ask the specific questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks so much. I'd like to welcome you virtually to the Courtauld's print and drawing study room. And as I imagine quite a few of you may never have actually visited or experienced it, I just want to start by telling you a little bit about our prints and drawings collection. And I've actually, after that, I've actually chosen 6 drawings from the collection of drawings of animals to show you. So I'm really looking forward to sharing them with you and answering any questions that you have. And I should also say before I start showing you the drawings that should you wish to sketch them while I'm speaking about them, that's great. And if you'd like to go back and look at them again afterwards, they're all available on the website. So do check them out there. Could I have the next slide, please? Right, so I just want to give you a little introduction to the collection. This is actually the largest part of the Courtauld Gallery's collection. We've got about 7,000 drawings and 26,000 prints. And if you compare that to the paintings collection, which is about 500 paintings, it's quite a big difference. And it's one of the larger collections of works on paper in the UK. I mean, obviously it's a bit smaller than places like the British Museum, but it's pretty comprehensive in that it covers all the major Western European schools, and it ranges from about the Renaissance right up to the present. And the reason it's so comprehensive is that it was actually originally put together by the Courtauld's founders as a study collection for the students, because they believe very strongly that you need direct access to original works of art in order to properly study the history of art. Can I have the next slide, please? In normal times, I would be welcoming you to our actual print study room, and this is the room as it was and will be in our home in Somerset House. This is where we make the collection available to visitors. It's used by a huge array of people from teachers and students at the Courtauld, teachers and students from other universities, art students, practicing artists, interested members of the general public. And we are, this is kind of a preview for next year's big draw. The study room should be open again this time next year, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully welcoming you all back there this time next year to look at some drawings in person. So this is just to give you a sense of what the space is like. Could I have the next slide, please? And the other main way that we share the prints and drawings collection is in our drawings gallery, which is obviously going to be reopening with the rest of the gallery next year. And we have both loan exhibitions with drawings borrowed from other collections, and we also use it as a way of showing off our own collection in themed displays. So that's another way you can get to know the collection in real life once the gallery is reopened next year. Can I have the next slide, please? Right. So I thought I'd get into showing you the drawings I've selected today. Choosing just a handful of drawings of animals from the collection, as you might imagine, was pretty difficult, given that there are 7,000 drawings in the collection, and a fair number of them depict animals. I was quite surprised when I was pulling together the selection. It was quite tough to narrow down. So I'm going to be showing them to you in more or less chronological order. I've tried to cover most Western European schools. So we're going to range from the Netherlands to Germany to France to Italy to Britain. And this particular one, as I said, this is the earliest drawing in the selection. It's by a Flemish artist named Roelant Savary. Now, Savary was he was part of a generation of artists that came immediately after Peter Bruegel the Elder, and they were extremely influenced by Bruegel's example. Bruegel brought a new emphasis on naturalism and on looking directly at nature. Rather than just copying existing models in his work. And Savary really took that to heart in his drawings, which we especially see in a wonderful group of drawings that he produced during a period in his career when he was actually working abroad. He was one of the artists who worked for the court of the Emperor Rudolf II in Prague. He was there for 12 years. He arrived in 1604 and departed in 1616. And while he was working for the imperial court, he made a tremendous number of just on-the-spot sketches of people and of animals and plants and just little bits of landscape, which he which he used as material for paintings. And he didn't necessarily go out and make these sketches with a specific painting in mind. It's just he would see a person or an animal and think that looks really neat. That might be useful later on. So this is one of these drawings that he made just out and about in Prague. It's a drawing of a sadly rather emaciated looking mule in harness that he probably would have seen just standing in the marketplace. And he's obviously taken advantage of the fact that this is a domestic animal is a pretty easy thing to draw. They're tame and they stand still, and obviously this one is in quite an elaborate harness, so it's not going to make any sudden moves. But he's taken a lot of trouble to capture as much detail as he can on the spot. But if we look at the inscriptions that he's made all over the sheet, we see he's also just made some notes of details that he couldn't quite get down at the moment or with the materials he had. He was just using just ink and black chalk, so he couldn't really render the color of the animal. So he's made a few notes about the color of the mule's coat and the harness and some of the other trappings. And then the inscription in the lower right corner, that's something very, very important. It says in Dutch, "Naar het leven," which means "done from life." Layla, shall I take a few of the questions now?
Yeah, so no one's actually sent any questions through, but
Oh.
I wondered, because I'm looking at it and I think the way that the fur is drawn just underneath the harness is really interesting, and I was wondering if you could say anything about that.
Well, it does look as if he's noticed that the mule's coat has been just a bit rubbed and a bit flattened by the harness, which is, and it's like to be able to actually capture that with like such economy is really amazing. And it's I mean demonstrates not only his talent but also like how practiced he was at capturing details really quickly.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we also now have a question: how was the ink? How has the ink remained so vibrant?
There are two possible ways that it could have remained vibrant. One is that although it probably is iron gall ink, which does tend to deteriorate over time because it's acidic. I would imagine that Savary was just very good at mixing his ink and managed to make it not too acidic so that it hasn't turned too brown, it hasn't started to eat into the paper. The other reason why it looks so fresh is that it seems to have been this drawing, although it was just although Savary just used it as a working drawing as a material for his other work. It seems that it must have gone into the collection of someone who really treasured it quite early on. So it's been kept very well. It's been kept away from light, which obviously discolors paper. So I think it's a drawing that's been treasured and very well looked after for a long time before it even came to us.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that. And someone, Sarah's just making the comment that the eyes have been drawn in a way that makes it look like a really kind mule. And I can really see that. Love the details
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
eyelashes.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So someone else is asking if the artist was around during the time of Elizabeth I. Just looking at the date.
Oh gosh, what are her dates? I cannot remember that off the top of my head.
Me either. This is terrible. I'm going to use the excuse that I'm Scottish and don't know that.
I have the excuse that I'm American.
Exactly.
Yes, I think he would have been around at that time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure his dates overlap. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And someone's asking if the artist drew animals and people, and if they drew in style all the time. That's the style here.
Yes, Savary did. He did draw animals and people, but he's actually best known for his landscapes. So the animals and people that he was drawing typically are, for placement into landscapes, into like larger scenes. So he wasn't he wasn't someone who specialized in like doing portraits or just doing paintings of animals by themselves.
Great. Well, I think that might be all the questions for this drawing. So we can maybe move on to the next one, and I can see what other questions come through.
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Rachel.
Right. Okay. So we're going to move a little bit further into the probably the 17th century still, although we haven't got an actual date for this drawing. And this is a drawing that's attributed to Maria Sibylla Merian, who's one of the most fascinating figures of both art and science in the 17th and early 18th centuries. So I mean, as you might imagine, it was pretty unusual for a woman at this time not only to go into to have an artistic career, but also to have a scientific career, and she actually had both. She was she came from an artistic family in Switzerland. She was the daughter of the engraver and publisher Matthäus Merian, and her father died when she was quite young. Her mother remarried a Dutch still life and flower painter named Jacob Marel, and this turned out to be an incredible stroke of good fortune for Merian herself, because Marel took her under his wing and decided to train her as an artist. And thanks to studying still life and flower painting, she also got very interested in natural history at quite an early age, and she specialized in drawing insects and plants. And actually, one of the reasons why this drawing is attributed to her rather than firmly, like say like we have, like actually know this is by Merian, is that shells are actually not her her usual subject matter. And in fact, she actually ended up training her two daughters as natural history illustrators and artists. So it could well have been the work of one of her daughters instead. But very likely to have been done by one member of this amazing family of female naturalists and illustrators, which is amazing. And one of the most exciting and important things about Marianne's work was that her work, I mean, really relied on firsthand observation of her subjects, often over extended periods of time. She actually made some really important discoveries about the life cycle and the metamorphoses of insects. In fact, none other than David Attenborough considers her one of the most important contributors to the field of entomology, that is the study of insects. But this particular object, this particular animal, is actually the shell of a branched murex, which is a carnivorous sea snail that mainly lives in the Western Indian Ocean. And I see a couple of people have asked whether Marianne traveled. Yes, she did, and in fact, she is most famous for a scientific expedition that lasting 2 years that she made to Suriname between 1699 and 1701, which was then a Dutch colony. And the book that she produced, the illustrated volume that she produced from this expedition was incredibly important and influential. But she didn't actually travel to any areas of the world where the branched murex occurs. So it seems more likely that she would have seen it in a collector's cabinet in Amsterdam, where she spent most of her adult life. It was very popular for people of a scholarly bent to and who obviously had enough money to do this, to assemble collections of natural curiosities. These are called collectors cabinets, or cabinets of curiosities, and these collections are kind of the forerunner of modern day museums. And this seems like very obviously to be a shell that is empty, hasn't got the snail still in it. So which also suggests that she drew the shell from life, but the shell is just a shell. It hasn't got the living creature in it anymore. And of course, if you are going to be making such an incredibly detailed and highly worked drawing of an animal, then if you have the luxury of having one that just doesn't move at all, then obviously that helps a great deal.
That's great, Rachel. I absolutely love this work, and it's great to show off a piece that's by a women artist in our collection as well, because I don't think many people would know that we have that.
Yeah, we don't have as many works by women as I personally would like, but we do have more than you would suspect.
Yeah, and I love this piece as well because I grew up next to the coast, and it's great, and I miss it. So it's wonderful. So we have a few questions that have come through.
Okay.
The first one is, how rare is the work?
How rare is the work? Well, Marianne was quite prolific during her life. She lived 70 years, and she got started as an artist, as an illustrator, very at quite a young age. So there is a lot of her work about, but not much of it. There's not a huge amount of it in the UK.
Yeah. Interesting. Someone else is also asking what body color is, because I've seen that in the image description.
Okay. So body color is opaque watercolor. It's watercolor that has had some lead white added to it to make it opaque. So it is something that is very much liked by natural history illustrators, for example, because it allows them to render different surface effects than you could do with watercolor alone.
Cool. I don't know if I actually knew that, so that's really great to know. And someone, this is the last question that we've got through, is asking if the artist also did different works, such as paintings, or if it was mainly like drawings like this one.
She mainly did these very elaborate watercolors. a lot of her drawings were then reproduced in books and other publications in the form of engravings, but she wouldn't have made those herself.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions for this one.
All right, well, let's move on.
Oh,
Great.
there we
Okay.
go.
Perfect. Okay, so now we skip ahead about a century to Italy. And this is a amazing, slightly cartoony-looking drawing by the Venetian artist Giovanni Domenico Tiepolo of a crocodile emerging from rushes at the water's edge. And so Tiepolo, Giovanni Domenico was one of a great family of Venetian artists. His father was, of course, Giovanni Battista Tiepolo. And between the two of them, they really dominated the Venetian art world in the 18th century. And although, I mean, obviously, Venice is a city built on water. It's a city through which many lagoons cut. But there are no crocodiles in Venice. Well, he didn't. I mean, he didn't, as far as we know, travel to any place where he could have seen a crocodile during his lifetime. So the answer to where he found the model for this drawing is he found it in a book of prints. This was actually a very common practice of his. Tiepolo loved to draw animals of all kinds, not just exotic beasts like crocodiles, but he did like stags, horses, foxes, etc., etc. And particularly in the later part of his career, after he returned from a stint working in Madrid, he filled numerous portfolios with drawings of animals. Many of these he seems to have used as material for the frescoes that he was doing at his country villa outside Venice in a little town called Zianigo. Research has shown that virtually none of his drawings of animals were done from real life. Even the animals that he actually could have seen in his local area. A lot of them, including this one of the crocodile, were actually based on prints by the German artist Johann Elias Rittinger, who specialized in drawings and prints of particularly of animals hunting each other or fighting each other to the death. And Rittinger published a number of these engravings in very popular collections during his lifetime. And it's thought that Giovanni Domenico Tiepolo may actually have met Rittinger while passing through his native city of Augsburg in 1750, and it may be then that he acquired a copy of this volume of prints. A 20th century scholar of Tiepolo's work says that it's perhaps a little disappointing, or at least disconcerting, to our present ideas about art to find that so few of Tiepolo's animals were drawn from life. But generally, it was not his way to trouble himself with a living model if a pictorial one, his own or someone else's, was at hand. So Tiepolo he had absolutely no problem with just drawing his animals from books or like from other pictures rather than going out and finding them himself. And that was that does seem a bit weird to us now, but it was very common practice at the time. And this is the practice of artists drawing from models or from pattern books stretches back centuries and centuries. So what he was doing was very very accepted practice at the time. But there's a kind of an interesting postscript to this this print of a crocodile that by Johann Elias Rittinger that Tiepolo copied, because this print, and actually this book of prints, was so popular that there are drawings by other artists all across Europe after this particular print of the crocodile. Could I have the next slide, please? In fact, even in the Courtauld collection, there is another drawing by in this case a British artist who was inspired by Ridinger's print of the crocodile. There's also a drawing in a different medium in red chalk by the French 18th century artist François Boucher of the same print. So these are these are artists working in Italy, in England, in France, all inspired by this print by a German artist. So if ever you needed an example of how important prints were in the spread of images and ideas around the world and certainly across Europe, I can't think of any better example.
Great, yeah. I think this piece was really interesting as well because the eyes look really similar to the mule's eyes. They don't look anything like real crocodile eyes. Very yeah, cartoony, like a
Yeah, well, I think that's. I mean, it's. I should probably also say that I very much doubt that Ridinger himself had seen a crocodile. He was probably basing his on other prints and on written descriptions.
Yeah, it kind of appears that way. So we have again, yeah, 3 questions.
Sure.
Here. So someone's asking if there's any other animals that he drew in particular.
Oh, Tiepolo drew loads of different animals. He drew stags, horses, dogs, also all birds, lions, etc. But like most, but virtually all done from other pictures rather than from actually going out and observing. Even the ones that he could actually have seen in his area.
Yeah, great. Yeah, a lot of yeah, lions, crocodiles, lots of things that are really dangerous as well. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, the next question is, what painting was Tiepolo working on the time he made the drawing, and if there was a meaning as well behind the crocodile in the work?
Well, he a lot of these his animal drawings were they were studies for frescoes in his with which he decorated his country house. But I don't actually know whether the crocodile made it into those frescoes.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, but I mean, like it actually would have worked quite well as a fresco because it's kind of like emerging onto the bank like the bank of a pond or a lake, and that would have been quite quite good in terms of like it's kind of like an illusionistic like rendering like the animal it's kind of like creeping onto a ledge on the wall and out into our space. So that would have been quite, yeah, it would have been quite a good subject for a fresco, but I don't know whether he actually used it.
If only. Yeah, so the last question we have is if any of them actually attributed to the fact that they'd used this previous book and artist's work.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think any of them would actually have written on the drawing. I did this after a print by Ridinger, but I think this volume of prints was so well known at the time. I think people would have just picked up on that anyway.
Great, thank you. I'll hand back to you for the next drawing.
All right. So I've been talking a lot about Johann Elias Ridinger's animal prints, but I wanted to actually show you one of his drawings. Ridinger, as I've already mentioned, specialized in drawing in images of animals, both exotic and more local. But this is a particularly special drawing because rather unusually among his drawings of animals from other parts of the world, this one actually is observed from real life. We can tell that he's actually spent a lot of time just standing there and looking at the rhinoceros and very carefully sketching it. He's even chosen to draw parts of it, like one of its feet and its head from different angles, all combined on the same sheet. And if you're wondering where on earth Ridinger might have seen a rhinoceros in in the 18th century? Well, this is not just any rhinoceros. This is a celebrity rhinoceros. I'm sorry, actually, the date on there is sorry, not quite correct. His life date should be 1767, not 1747. So obviously he didn't draw it after he died. So this is a rhinoceros called Clara, who was captured in India and toured Europe between 1741 and 1758. And she was, I mean, she kind of became everyone's darling. There was a huge craze for Clara. There were there was souvenir Claras in porcelain and more humble materials produced all over the place. And artists lined up to draw and to paint her in every country that she passed through. Could I have the next slide, please? One of the most famous is this painted portrait by the French artist Jean-Baptiste Udry, which is now in a museum in Germany. And Clara was only the 5th rhinoceros ever to be seen in Europe, and it was she was the first one who actually got taken around and a lot of people saw. And before then, most Europeans' idea of what a rhinoceros looks like came from this famous print by Albrecht Dürer, which was made in 1515 from what is, I think, believed to be the first rhinoceros who ever visited Europe. Now, Dürer didn't actually see the rhinoceros himself. It was displayed in a menagerie in Lisbon, and Dürer made the print based partly on a written description and partly on another artist's sketch. But as you can see, he got quite a lot of details of the rhinoceros wrong. But this is, I mean, that's the way that artists had to draw animals that they weren't familiar with, that they couldn't see for themselves. That was how they had to draw them for centuries. And it was really only starting in the 18th century when you had animals brought over and toured around Europe like Clara, where you actually see artists actually getting a chance to observe them firsthand. So Ridinger's drawing, if I could just go back to the previous slide. Yeah, so Ridinger's drawing of Clara asleep or resting, I mean, that shows a degree of realism that just simply would not have been possible before.
Great. So we have a question here. What biblical meanings are implied in the representation of the rhino?
I'm going to have to pass on that. Do you know?
No, I actually don't know. Yeah, at all. And then the other question is asking why Dürer made it look like the rhino is made out of armor, which is actually something that comes up a lot, and also in fantasy now and children's stories. They quite often represent rhinos as wearing armor, which is really interesting. So I wonder if that stems from this as well.
Well, I think it probably stems from the way he understood the sketch that he would have seen, plus the written description. If you sorry, if you could just go back one more, if you do compare it to the painting, the portrait of Clara by Udry, I mean, you can kind of see how someone might have understood the rhino's hide as being made up of plates of armor rather than skin. But yeah, I think if you actually put Dürer's rhinoceros alongside a real one, you can kind of see how that mistake would have been made, I think.
Yeah, definitely, when you can see them up close. I also love that we know that the rhino is called Clara. It's such a sweet name for such a, yeah. Someone was also asking if the drawing had been done in a private zoo. I'm not sure if you've mentioned that.
Oh, well, I mean, I think she was traveled around Europe. I don't, I mean, she was generally, I mean, displayed in public, but I mean, there weren't public zoos at the time the way that we understand them. So yes, maybe.
Yeah, I guess what we think of as a zoo is something now that would also be about maintaining and the environment and ecosystem and habitat.
Yeah, and that
So
absolutely wasn't
it's
I
different.
mean,
Yeah.
like, that was not a concern at all back in the 18th century. So it was more about, you know, showing off something, you know, something weird and exotic than actually looking after a rare animal.
Great. Okay, that's all the questions for that one as well. So I'll let you get back to it.
All right. Okay, so now we move into well, probably the later part of the 18th century. But this is a work by someone who, similarly to Maria Sibylla Merian, was actually a naturalist first. And actually, unlike Merian, we don't know whether he actually had any formal artistic training. So this is a drawing by Pierre Sonnerat, who was a French naturalist, writer, and colonial administrator, and he's best known for his travels in Madagascar, which is where he actually made this drawing, as well as in India and Southeast Asia. And as I've just mentioned, he wasn't a trained artist the way that Maria Sibylla Merian was. He was probably mostly self-taught, just, you know, by and around the demands of his profession. Although he may have had some training from his uncle, who was the great French botanist Pierre Poivre. So this particular drawing is one that he made on one of his voyages to Madagascar, and he's very carefully noted down exactly what the fish is and where he saw it. Although he on a number of his drawings, Sonnerat actually got the he got the name or the species wrong. This was known for many years as a picture of a guaperva, which actually that's not actually what the fish is. We now know that it's a lagoon triggerfish, which is a fish that lives it's found in many tropical seas around the world, but it is certainly found, yeah, in the Indian Ocean around Madagascar. And actually, interestingly enough, in an artistic context, the lagoon triggerfish is actually today also known as the Picasso triggerfish because of its colorful and rather artistic-looking markings. So this is this is very much drawing as you know, scientific illustration rather than a work of art. And Sonnerat would almost certainly have made this from a dead fish out of water. There's no way he could have done this underwater, obviously. So again, this is like, you know, the animal as scientific specimen rather than living creature.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't look like a healthy fish there.
No.
A shame. But yeah, I just wanted to ask a question because it's got the border around it. Is that because it's a scientific drawing?
Yes, and like I mean, he was probably intending it for it to be turned into a print and published.
Hmm. And it also looks like it's got teeth as well. Someone's asking if it bites humans. You might not know the answer to this.
No, I don't. Well, it's not a particularly large fish. I think that those teeth are actually mainly for scraping very tiny creatures out of rocks and coral. So yeah, so it's not a particularly aggressive fish.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's not like a piranha and stuff like that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. So we're being asked as well if the drawing would have been sold to be framed.
It could have been, yeah. I mean, there certainly was a market for such drawings, so it could well have been. But I think the border is probably more for, yeah, just like for how it's meant to look in a, you know, when eventually published in a book.
Great. And the other question we have is about the fin at the top, which looks particularly small. And it's something that I have seen quite a lot in what people have framed as scientific drawings or anatomical drawings, where it's actually incorrect. So people are wondering if that fin should be bigger or if it was a mistake.
Um, I would have to look again at a photo of a lagoon triggerfish to be able to answer that.
Yeah.
But as you know, as I mentioned, Sonara did. I mean, he is known to have made mistakes, both both in his recording of the appearance of animals that he found, and also in their nomenclature. So it is I mean, I wouldn't be able to say without looking at it, like looking at the actual fish, but it's possible.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I've ever seen these fish actually, because someone's telling us that the teeth are for breaking corals, and I've been to quite a few coral reefs to dive, and apparently they sometimes do chase divers. So
Oh, really?
that's good to know.
Okay.
That happened to me.
All right. Well, then I know to be aware, be wary of lagoon triggerfish if I ever come across them.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's all the questions just now.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to finish up a little bit closer to home and a little bit closer to us in time, and this is a drawing by Edwin Henry Landseer, who is one of the great, I mean, well, really regarded as the greatest animal painter in Victorian Britain. And he's best known for painting horses, dogs, and stags. And it has to be admitted, a lot of his paintings are rather sentimental, and they do anthropomorphize the animals quite blatantly. And indeed sometimes inaccurately. Kind of a bit of interesting trivia about Landseer. The myth that Saint Bernards, who are mountain rescue dogs in the Alps, that they carry a little barrel of brandy around their necks, that's totally untrue. But the reason that is so often thought to be the case is that actually stems from a painting of his. So he's responsible for creating that particular urban myth. But although we tend to think of Landseer as a very sentimental painter, what's often forgotten is that his work is generally based on exacting, sustained firsthand observation of the animals, and that's definitely the case here. This drawing is probably a study for the lions in Trafalgar Square, which are probably his most famous work. So the four lions around the base of Nelson's Column, they were commissioned in 1858, but there were, I mean, because of a number of ongoing problems, which I mean, it would take me ages to detail them here. They weren't actually completed until 1867. But during this, I mean, this long generation of the sculptures, Landseer made numerous studies for the lions by going to London Zoo and drawing them on the spot. And in fact, this is one of two studies of lions from probably done at the London Zoo that we have in the collection that relate to the lion sculptures at the base of Nelson's Column. And the paper and the materials that Landseer chose for making the study are very important. It's kind of like a buff paper. It's quite smooth, and he's used chalk, which is it's not, I mean, not only easy to blend with either with a stump or with his fingers to capture very subtle variations in the texture and the color of the lion's coat, but it's also quite easy to erase. So he was something that he could quite easily correct on the spot. And as I said, there are numerous examples of these studies of lions, both heads or the whole animal that went into the creation of these iconic sculptures. So it's really interesting to to be able to look at the drawings and have some insight into the creative process that behind the sculptures.
Yeah, fab. It's Really interesting as well, because that's what people are asking for you to say a little bit more about that process of changing from the image to an actual sculpture, because this is such a detailed picture that you can see each part of its mane, etc. So yeah, if you know anything else about that, people would love to know.
Well, I mean, he made numerous drawings of, you know, of lions from all different angles. I think to just get to really get a sense of what how to render them in 3 dimensions. Because I should have mentioned before, he really didn't have much experience as a sculptor, so he was kind of a weird choice for this major sculptural commission. And in fact, one of the reasons that the from commission to completion was so long was that he actually was trying to obtain some casts of lions from an academy in, I think it was in Turin, and they were just very, very long in coming. So he used a combination of casts and his own drawings in order to find a way to render his lions in 3 dimensions.
Great. And we're also being asked about what else he used to paint and how he got the brownish color to this work.
So this is three chalks. It's red, black, and white chalk, and many artists who use this combination of 3 chalks found, you know, starting with Peter Paul Rubens and Jean Antoine Watteau and Landseer, found you could, I mean, through various ways of just blending the chalks, you could actually create an incredible array of different colors, or at least the illusion that you were looking at far more colors than just red, black, and white. So the kind of the brown tawny tones, that's made from blending red and black.
Great. And the last question we have is, where did he learn to draw?
So he Landseer studied at the Royal Academy schools, which was kind of like the most prestigious art school in Britain at the time. It was kind of like the accepted path for becoming a great officially accepted artist. So yeah, that's where he learned.
I think that's all the questions. I don't know if you've got anything else to wrap up, Rachel.
Let's see. Well, I mean, just to say that you know, these 6 or actually 7 drawings, because I sneaked in the one by Riley. These are really just the tip of the iceberg. So I do invite you to not only explore the collection online, but when we are finally open again and accepting visitors in the print room, please come and explore the collection. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, we definitely can't wait to all get back and see everyone as well, because we've not seen each other in so long, Rachel, as well, just on this screen. But yeah, thank you so much. It was so interesting to look at works that I've never actually seen before as well. So I hope everyone else enjoyed it. I can see some chat coming through saying how much they liked it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a short break for about 15 minutes and we'll be back at 1:30. So we'll see you all then. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everyone. I hope you enjoyed your wee break. We are now going to start the second half of our day, which looks more at using plants as artistic material rather than just looking at animals and their habitat. Remember, you can ask questions via the chat, and also please do send us any of your finished artworks on social media at Courtauld Res. Remember as well to always have an adult with you when you're taking part in any of the activities. So first up this afternoon, we have the wonderful Sam Hodge, who's hosting her workshop, Drawing with Trees. Sam is an artist working with paint and printmaking to investigate material transformations, and you can see her full bio in the programme that we sent you the link for today. So welcome and thank you, Sam, for joining us. I will pass over to you to get started.
Hi, hello everybody. So in this workshop, we'll be finding out about how trees both inspire artists and also give them materials to work with. And we will look at paintings from the Courtauld collection of people changing into trees or being transformed by eating their fruit, and think about our own relationship with trees today. And I will show you how to make drawing materials such as charcoal and ink from twigs that you have gathered, and encourage you to draw some imaginary fruiting, rooting, sprouting trees. So people and trees have a very special relationship. Trees provide us with so many useful things. I can't see you, but perhaps you're sitting on a wooden chair at a wooden table. But in the past, people relied on trees for even more. Trees gave them food, firewood, building materials for houses, ships, fences, and very importantly, tools, including many of the things that artists needed to make paintings and drawings. Trees stand upright like us. They have limbs and lumps and bumps like us. They're alive like us, but they're much larger and stronger than us, rooted to the ground, growing slowly and living much longer than us, sometimes for hundreds of years. So it's not surprising that trees seemed precious and powerful, and that people told all sorts of stories about them. Stories about how trees might have the power to change people, or they might even be people. So I'm going to focus on two of these old stories that inspired paintings in the Courtauld gallery. This painting is one of my favorite paintings. Oh no, yeah, stay with that one. My favorite paintings in the Courtauld gallery. It was painted about 500 years ago by an artist called Cranach, and it shows a scene from the Bible story of Adam and Eve. You can't help noticing all the amazing animals in this painting who lived with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, but really the story is about the tree in the center, which is called the tree of knowledge. If you eat the fruit of this tree, which Cranach has painted to look like an apple tree with tasty looking red apples, it will change you. It will make you understand the difference between good and evil and give you knowledge so that you're not innocent anymore. And God told Adam and Eve not on any account to eat the fruit from this tree. They could eat fruit or nuts from any other tree, but just not this one. But the devil in the form of a snake, maybe you could zoom into the top half of the painting. Fern, can you do that? Because the trees, yeah, that's better, yeah. So, yeah. The serpent tempted Eve, telling her that eating the fruit would give her and Adam wisdom and make them more like God. And the painting shows the moment that Eve passes the apple to Adam and persuades him to eat some of it. Of course, you probably know the story didn't end well. God was furious with Adam and Eve for disobeying him, and he threw them out of their paradise garden into the harsh world outside. Can I have the next slide, please? When people look at trees, they sometimes see faces or bodies in the trunks and think of the branches as arms. The ancient Greeks told stories of how some trees were once humans that had changed to take the form of a tree. This little sketch in pen and ink by an artist called Jacob Pinas shows Daphne in the middle, trying to escape from the god Apollo, who was chasing her. As he grabs her, she prays in desperation for help and begins to transform into a tree. You can see her arms growing into branches and her fingers growing into twigs, and soon her feet will root into the ground, her skin will be covered in rough bark, and she will be safe from Apollo's clutches. Next slide, please. Many artists have been inspired to paint this story of Daphne transformed into a laurel tree, and this is one of my favorites by Poole in the National Gallery, and it shows Daphne already half tree, her arms now limbs of wood sprouting leaves. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So what sort of stories do we tell about trees today? We know that they breathe out oxygen from their leaves, and we need that to breathe in, and they take in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. So we are connected to them through the air we breathe. Recent scientific research has also realized that they have complex root networks that link up to other trees and fungi underground so they can share nutrients. They can also communicate with each other by sending chemicals through the air. Unfortunately, just as we're discovering all these amazing things about trees, we've already cut down many of the forests of the world. And to save the remaining forests and to help new ones to grow, we have to start valuing trees as complex living beings that give us and other creatures many gifts. Not just think of them as planks of wood that are in the way of some development. Trees have provided many gifts to artists, as well as inspiration for paintings like the ones we've seen. They help in practical ways. Artists of the past relied on wood from trees to make many of the things they needed to paint with. And even today, trees still provide us with art materials. Have you got some paper in front of you? That's made from wood. Probably your pencil and the handle of your brush are wood. In the past, artists were even more reliant on trees than we are now. Can you go back one slide? This painting was painted on a wooden panel cut from a poplar tree. Go back another slide. Thank you. So, and this is drawing. It was sketches were like this, were often made of oak galls collected from trees, or with charcoal made from burnt wood, used either as a stick or mixed with tree sap to make an ink. So can you go on 2 slides? Yeah. Next one, that's it, that's great. These sketches of trees were drawn by David Cox and were made with charcoal like this. And they're sketches drawn directly from the trees he saw outside. Drawing from real trees like this helped artists make finished paintings of trees back in their studios. And charcoal is really particularly good for making quick sketches like this. So these are charcoal sticks that I bought from a shop, and they're made with twigs cut from willow trees, which is supposed to make the best charcoal. Grapevine twigs are also very good, but really you can make charcoal from pretty much any stick you find. If you would like to make some charcoal from sticks, I'm now going to show you how. Okay, that's great. If you only cut a few twigs, it will not harm the tree, which will grow back easily. But you can also find sticks that have already fallen off the tree or been pruned and use those. This week I made charcoal from twigs that I found on the ground that had been blown off this ash tree in the Lake District. These ash trees have been regularly cut, which is called pollarding, for hundreds of years to provide leaves for sheep and cows to eat, and also firewood for people, but they are now in danger from a disease called ash dieback, which is spreading across the country and killing them. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make some charcoal from their twigs, so that I could make some paintings and drawings with and of these old trees before they're gone. Next slide, please. So making charcoal involves sharp implements and fire, so it can be dangerous. And please take care if you do make your own, and get an adult to help you, unless you are an adult. So first, in order to make charcoal, you have to cut up the twigs to fit inside a metal container. I cut them with a pair of secateurs like that. But if you don't have secateurs, choose twigs that are not too thick, and you can just snap them. You need a container like this to stop too much oxygen getting in and making the sticks just burn away completely to ash. This container is a honey jar, but you can also use golden syrup jars like that. They're really good. And but first, before you do that, next slide, please. You have to make a hole in the top of the lid, because when the tin goes into the hot fire, the air expands. And if you haven't got a hole for the air to get out, it can cause the lid to come off in a kind of explosion, which is really dangerous, and you don't want that. So next slide, please. So this is a Kendall mint cake tin, which doesn't really need a hole because it's not totally airtight anyway, because it's got hinges. I've used it a few times already, so it's getting quite black from being in the fire. Next slide, please. This is a wood burning stove at the house I was staying in the Lake District. So if you have access to one of those, it's perfect for making charcoal. But if not, you can also do it in a barbecue or a bonfire. You must use tongs so that your hands don't get too close to the fire. And you have to put the tin on the red hot coals to be sure that it will get hot enough to turn all the wood into charcoal. Then you wait for the fire to die down, take the tin out with the tongs, and next slide, please. When you open up your tins, you've got blackened charcoal twigs. Right, could you play the video next? So when the charcoal comes out of the fire, all the sticks have transformed into this black brittle substance, charcoal. You can draw directly onto paper with it, immediately without doing anything to it. Lovely thing about charcoal is the way that you can rub into it to make shadows. Using a rubber if you want to. So this is a piece of charcoal that came from one of that ash tree that I was showing you a photograph earlier. I'm drawing with the ash tree. Play around with charcoal. If there's bits you don't like, you can rub them out completely. So it's very adaptable. But also I'm going to show you how to make this charcoal into ink and paint that was often used by artists in the past as well. And to do that, I'm going to show you how to crush it into tiny little bits of pigment that you can then mix with a binder. And for the binder, I'm using a gum arabic, which also comes from trees. Or if you don't have any of that, some beaten egg. Okay, so I'm putting the charcoal into this pestle and mortar. I'll show you an alternative way of crushing it if you don't have a pestle and mortar, but if you do, that's definitely the best thing to use. So give it a good bash. But it's quite nice to do it by hand. Just keep grinding and grinding for as long as you can be bothered. The more you grind, the finer the particles will be and the smoother your paint. Great. Another way of grinding, if you don't have a pestle and mortar, you can use a plastic bag, put one of your pieces of charcoal inside it, and maybe a couple of pieces, and then crush them with a rolling pin. Doing that in pretty much the same sort of way you would in the pestle and mortar. Until you have lovely fine pieces of charcoal. going to add some medium, some of the gum arabic to it to make an ink. And this was the kind of ink that artists used to do sketches and to draw out their designs before they painted onto their panels or their canvas, or even walls if they were wall painting. And charcoal black like this is still used to make watercolours and ink today. So you mix in just about enough to wet your pigment. It's quite thick, too thick to use like that. So you then want to add a bit of water to make it a workable sort of ink. If you were going to use a pen, you'd probably want to grind this a bit more because it's quite gritty, and also perhaps add a little bit more water. But we're going to paint it with a brush and also with a stick, because I like using things from trees. Sorry about that noise, it's the rain. If you don't have any of the gum arabic, you can use egg. Just add a little, oops, it's a little bit too much. I need to add a bit more pigment. Mix that in. And this is just whole beaten egg. Painters in the past that were painting on wood panels would use the egg yolks only, separated out from the egg whites. And artists who were doing manuscripts would use the egg white, but I quite like using the two of them together. So I'm just mixing it in to make a sort of paste. Mixing the pigment thoroughly into the egg. Add a bit of water. And you've made a paint. It's not really, it's too thick for it to use in a pen, so you can't really call that an ink. It's more of a paint. So let's have a little play with these. The nice thing about making your own charcoal ink like this is that it does have its own character. The grit means that it dries in interesting ways, and you get a kind of texture that dries, which I'll show you some of later. I love the way that branches keep on getting smaller and smaller. They divide over and over again towards the edge of the tree. And you can also add a bit of water. You can get some interesting effects like that as it dries. The egg that you paint is much thicker and has a different sort of quality to it, but they're both lovely to paint with. And if you're stuck with your tree, you kind of not knowing exactly how to start, one way I like to work sometimes is to let the the materials, the paint, do some of the work for you. So quite often I will just pour my paint onto the paper or canvas panel that I'm using and see what happens, because sometimes quite exciting things happen. So I've got quite an interesting shape there. How can I make that into a tree? I could use a brush and create a tree over the top of it, but one thing that I do quite like using for this kind of thing is just a piece, and even a piece of stick that hasn't been made into charcoal, but is just any old piece of stick. This is actually a piece of a climbing plant, honeysuckle, in my garden that was pruned, and it's quite soft, so it makes quite a good implement, better than a really hard wood twig. And you can use your penknife. Again, get an adult to help you with this. If you're not experienced with a sharp knife, you can use a scalpel if you've got one of those, or a very sharp kitchen knife, or a scalpel like this, or a penknife like this. So I'm sort of sharpening my stick, making it into an implement. So I can use one side to make very thin lines and the other side to make thicker lines, and I can start to make my shape into a strange tree. It's got a very bendy trunk. Maybe it's got some roots coming out here into the bank. So even the simplest things like a stick can be used to paint with. You don't need to buy fancy materials. You can make and find and make so many things for yourself. This looks like the sort of tree that someone's cut, sort of pollarded, and it's just growing back from the stump. And the lovely thing about using this handmade, homemade paint that's still gritty and got the character of the wood about it is that you get these lovely textures. Let me just show you something I made earlier. So this one, again, was made by just dripping, and you can see as it dries, it develops this lovely texture, a bit like the bark of a tree. So I hope that that one will develop like that too. Yeah, great, thank you. Nearly finished now. So sorry that we're running over a bit because of the delay. So here are two of the drawings I made with that technique I was showing you. The one on the left is made with the egg, and the one on the right with the gum Arabic. And next slide, please. So here I had a little play around on the left. I've got a drawing that I made with some charcoal where I just drew around my hand and then extended my fingers into branches and made my hand into a tree, which is kind of fun. And then the one on the right is a drawing I made of a tree stump that looks really human, I think, somehow, in my local park. And I made that using a dip pen and ink and a brush, and using oak gall ink made from oak galls that I found. And Charlotte's going to be telling you a bit more about oak gall ink later. And next slide, please, last slide. This is one of my prints made, which I make inspired by the branching patterns of trees. I like to use materials to make patterns like the patterns that you find in nature. So I hope that you've been inspired by this talk to make your own drawings of trees, and that you might want to think of imaginary trees that are half human, or trees that have strange fruits that transform you if you eat them, like the paintings we saw earlier. Or you can draw a tree that you know, but try to imagine what its roots are doing under the soil. Or you can go with the flow and respond to ink or paint runs and make them into trees. Or you can make your own charcoal and ink, like I've shown you. But if you don't want to make it, you can buy materials. Even just a pencil and paper will do fine. Just remember, all of these materials are made of trees, and imagine the tree helping you to make a drawing of it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sam. And also thank you for everyone for being so patient while we fixed our tech. This always seems to happen at some point in anything on Zoom. So just a reminder to always have an adult, as Sam said, when you're taking part in these activities. I am now very happy to welcome Adesina. Adi was born in Nigeria and is an artist currently living and working in Aberdeen, Scotland. So Adi, I'm going to invite you to start your video and unmute. So today, Adi is going to be taking us behind the scenes in his studio and showing us how to handprint summer flowers. So thank you for being with us today, Adi. I can see you're there.
Thank you for having me, and thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in. My name is Adesina. I'm a printmaker based in Aberdeen. I'll be doing some hand printing demonstration today. But before that, I'll run you through my work process. This is a pre-inked lino. This is a gray lino that I've inked up with orange ink. It just makes it easier to see every mark you make. Just like this, I just test lino to test marks and different kind of movement of the Dremel and tools. And I use traditional cutting tools. Traditional cutting tools, which you use for woodcut, lino, and other printmaking mediums. And this is my favorite too, the small V1. And I've been using this one for a very long time. So the handle is falling apart a bit. I also use engraving tools, anything that can basically make mark onto the lino to get tones and to get mid-tones, to take lino somewhere else, to be able to get what you usually won't get on lino. I also use etching needles. Like I said, anything that can make mark and create patterns and movement. I use styling knife, I use burnisher, which is usually used in etching. And my favorite one at the moment is a Dremel. This is a smaller one. They can be a bit noisy. And I use tiny little drills. I don't know if you can see them. And from 0.2 mm to 20, something like that. And I decided to set that you get 10 in a pack, and they're quite handy. And so this is, I got 0.4 drill in here, just to show you quickly how I make the mark. This is a fresh lino. I just think about, I think when I'm holding the drill or the Dremel, I think about it as my pen or my charcoal or my drawing medium. So I can go in any direction. And you can see how the marks are really clear, because without the orange ink on it, it's not really clear. But because I'm taking off the ink as I'm scratching as well, it's just a lot easier to see what I'm doing. You can go in any direction, and I can make like point leaving, and that will come out as a tone instead of white and black. And I've got the big drill. This is a bigger one, which is more powerful and more noisy. And it's a lot faster if you want to take a big area out. And it's a lot louder as well. And the drill in this one is about, I think this is 0.7. And I just mixed up all the tools to get different outcome from what you normally get from traditional carving tools. So I'll take you through my printing. I use Dix Baron. This is just got some tooth on it. And this is a lot cheaper than Bolt Baron, which has got some like tiny little balls that moves around. I'll be showing you how they work through the printing process. And this is a really cheap one. And this is Japanese made and printing material. And you can easily get this from any printmaking workshop, website. And today I also use, like I said, anything that can make mark, that can just to create tone and direction on the lino. This is one of the linos I'll be running you through today. And this is another one. And I'll quickly show you a finished big lino. I've been working on this for a very long time because it can get really, it's almost like watching a paint dry, and it can get really boring, and sometimes I'll abandon the project and go back to it. And this one is ready to print, so I'm open to print it maybe next time the printmaking workshop is open. I can easily print this as well, but because of the size and the kind of paper I'll be using, it's a lot easier to just go for the press. But normally when I'm proving, and let's say the weekend, the workshop is not open, I'll hand print in the studio to make sure the lino is fine. But because I spent so much time on this one, I think it should be just hopefully straightforward, and the first AP should just come out right. And before I usually print, I go a bit of Perspex onto the glass. I've got my paper. I'll just, to make a registration to get the print, because when you're editing, the print have to sit in the same place at all time. So I normally just drop my paper down, and I'll have like I have a mark around the paper in all angles, and just tape it down with masking tape. It's a lot easier when you tape it down because the paper doesn't move when you're using the ball bearing. And after marking that, you can see the marks on the glass. To get the lino, I already pre-made the marks just to make it faster. I drop the lino and do the same thing again. I use a permanent marker or anything that can make a clear mark. Then I got some pre-cut cards to go in every angle. Just because every time you get a print, you have to re-ink the liner. So the liner drop in the same place at all time. Take that down. Before that, you check all measurement on our side. I normally leave more space at the bottom just for the signature and tie to an edition number and date. So on top, I've got 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters on each side, and this is about 15 centimeters at the bottom. Then take this down. Make sure the line is sitting perfectly in the mark. Make. After taping all edges out, down, move the liner out because the second liner is a lot smaller, but because of the time limit, I'll just go with this registration for both liner. And after making that, you can see the paper has been taped down. I'll chop the liner and I move this out. Second get aspect for the inking. These are my rollers. Small one, I usually use a small one and a medium one. The knife. I usually use Pantone ink, which is commonly used in lighter printing, but I've been used to them, and the kind of black I get out of them is like a really deep black with no mid tones. So I get a little bit ink out. I'll just spread a little bit of the ink out. Behind. Spread a little bit of it more. And just go in our direction. Because of the nature of the cutting on the liners, because they're like half engraved and half traditional cut. So I always make sure the ink is really flat, light, not too heavy, because if it's too heavy, as soon as you drop the liner, the roller of the liner, you lose detail straight away. So by making it really flat, and you can actually hear that it's not too noisy, because when there's too much ink on the board, you can actually hear that. Yeah, the noise is too much, that means you got too much ink. So you can easily just scrape some out. Take some extra ink away. make it as light as possible. The aim of this is to just build up the ink gradually on the lino instead of slapping it on and losing a lot of detail. And onto the lino, just by dropping the roller on the lino, you're not pushing the ink into the detail. So just let it go slowly. And you can see the image. The lino is a bit dull because I've inked this up before. Normally they're really, really bright and you can actually see what it may look like on the paper. Because sometimes the lino, depend on the lino you're using, they may have a little bit of mark on them, and any mark on the lino will come out with a tone or a little bit like of patchiness. So that is when the small roller comes in, and you can easily just focus on areas that you think needs more ink without losing detail in the middle. By going through all the edges. And you can easily just put force on maybe one side by not pressing too hard in the middle. And after using the small roller, you get roller marks all over. So it's always good to go over it to finish the inking by using the bigger roller to get rid of as much roller marks as possible. After adding more into it, it's always good to just drop it again slowly and just let it without no pressure. And by the time you go back to the ink slab, you got less ink there already. So you can just put a little bit of force onto it. And you can hear as the ink builds up on the lino, the sound changes. It's beginning to sound like the ink slab on the lino. So that gives you an indication that you got enough ink. And these two pieces were inspired by the lockdown. Because they're in Aberdeen at the beginning of the lockdown, which was like spring, summer, the flowers were blooming and the seagulls were hard because we're close to the sea here, and nobody was out. It was absolutely beautiful outside. The sun came out, which is not really a thing in Aberdeen. We get a really cold weather up here. But it was just absolutely beautiful this summer, but no one could really go out. And it was just about talking about that subject of, even though there's a lot of beauty outside, but it seems in a glass, like you can't, it was almost like you couldn't touch, you couldn't go out, you couldn't enjoy the summer. But as time went on, everyone started going out slowly and being careful. Again, I'll go with the moral. And just carefully going through the edges. And you can always judge where, if you see anywhere that's patchy, by just tweaking the roller a bit and putting more force on the edges. So the ink, you get more ink on the edges. What I'm trying to do, because of the nature of this cup, is like, it's like jet black all around it. And if I apply the same ink on the edges to the middle, I'll start losing detail. So I'll put more focus on the edges and probably get like 100% ink on the edges, then maybe 80% ink on the middle. And finish it up with a bigger roller. The ink on the inking flat have to be completely flat, because if you have a ink build up on one section, that can absolutely affect the outcome of the print. After getting the ink even, and you can hear it again, that the ink is building up. Move my rollers out. Ink is slide out. The registration pathway can easily come back on. Basically what I've done is just after inking up, just slide the liner in. Because I got those cut taped down, they help just guide the liner into the registration. And they also help by keeping the liner in place so it doesn't move when you're using the barrels. And you just throw your paper on top. My favorite one is the ball barrel, because it's just a lot faster. It's the most expensive one. You can probably get a small press with the price of that, but that is not too expensive. Maybe about £20, £25, and this is about maybe £3. And I can start by using the cheapest one by just starting in the middle and just really slowly. Just trying to get the paper to go completely flat. And I'll come in with this one and start from the middle again, slowly. Then I'll find my edges where the line now is. I'm trying to establish where the line is sitting, so I can know where to really put the focus on. Got a little bit of ink on my hand, so clean that off so it doesn't affect the paper too much. When I'm working on a big piece and this with this ball barrel. It's almost like a good exercise. It can take up to 20 from 20 minutes to an hour to get a print of the big size. By just rubbing it slowly, you start to see the edges of the lino just coming visible. And you can bend the barrel as well to put focus on whichever area. And by this, you can actually control the tone of how the print is going to come out, because the more you focus on an area, the darker it comes out. I usually tape one side of the lino of the paper, just to give the paper a little bit of breathing space.
Hi, it's just Layla. That's the 5 minutes left, if that's okay. Thank you.
Now I'm putting more force into it, because by now the paper will have stuck on the line. Going with the next barrel, which got no moving part. Again, finish with the and the more you do it, the more you can see the actual image on the lino showing through the paper, like an emboss. And after that, I'll take the other hand down. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to do the second one. And fingers crossed, I've done enough. And there's some areas that are still a little bit patchy, which means it needs obviously more time, but you can just see maybe 10 minutes more will make the print a lot more clear. And yeah, that's how printing is done. Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time
Thank you so much, Shady. That's amazing. Thank you for taking the time to share your studio as well. It's really nice to see that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So we're now on to our final session of today with Charlotte de Mille. Charlotte has long been fascinated by the process of art and art history. She's been making her own inks for the last 4 years. But like everything else today, remember to be an adult when trying these activities at home. You can chat to Charlotte via the chat bar as well, and please let us know what you make and what you find really interesting via social media at Courtauld Res, or email us at researchforumevents@courtauld.ac.uk. Charlotte, it's lovely to see you, and I'm enjoying your kitchen setup there.
Hi, thank you, Layla. So I hope, and Fern for turning my video, I hope you can see so I'm only on thumbnail on my screen, you can see my saucepan. This is the most critical thing. So I'm going to start by saying I'm going to make some ink with you today. I think on the on my blurb beforehand, I said if you had some onion skins, red onion skins, this is perfect for what we're going to do. So I'm going to set this off, and then I'm going to start talking a little bit about ink and the history of ink. So first thing you need to do if you're in your kitchen and you've got some onion skins is put your onion skins in your saucepan, and then I would add some water. So adding just some boiling water here now because it's a bit quicker, but you can use cold water. And then I'm going to turn my cooker on. Hopefully it's not going to be too noisy, and we can then look at the history behind what I'm doing. Sorry. So I'm going to leave those brewing. If you're making this at home, what I've just done is just covered the onion skins. None of this makes a very large quantity of ink. We're making tiny quantities, in fact, but at least it's something to start with. So if Fern would now share my my presentation. Brilliant. And maybe go on to the next slide. So I wanted to give you a short history of ink while we are reducing our onion skins, and I wanted to really start by thinking from an art historical point of view. The first synthetic ink wasn't made until 1856. So before that, all those extraordinary colours that we know of from paintings and from drawings prior to 1856 were made from natural sources. The first synthetic was actually made by somebody called Sir Henry Perkin, and he had been set a challenge to find a cure for malaria, and he accidentally discovered movine, a sort of iodine-coloured dye instead, and that became all the rage in Victorian England, and so all the sort of Victorian rich purples that you see in paintings are partly inspired by the fact that this synthetic dye had just been invented. So of course there's a much longer history to colours and dye in pigment making than that. And on the screen now you've got an image of a page of the Book of Durrow. This is a very early manuscript, and it's fascinating because of the use of colour in that first letter. So you can see in that very, very beautiful decorated letter various colours there. Some of these colours were quite common of the date, and you'll see within this there are some yellows. This was made of Orpient yellow, most likely from the conservation chemical testing that's been done on this this manuscript. There's also some indigo in there, and some verdigris, which was made of orpiment yellow and indigo, so a bluish and a yellowish pigment coming together, and an earth tone, a red lead earth tone. So a lot of these early images or early paints, I should say, were collected as recipes in a manuscript called the Mappae Clavicula, and this included a text called On Colours and Mixing, effectively. And this was an art recipe book. It was for metals, but also for inks. And the core of this book was from the 3rd and 4th century. And so if Fern would turn my next slide, here we are. I wanted to show you what some of the pigments would look like when they came raw into an artist's workshop. So on the left-hand side on the screen, you have a wonderful little display from the National Gallery's exhibition of called Making Miniatures from 2018. This is an exhibition on 16th century miniature painters. It's really, really fascinating, and it had these introductory areas which showed how a miniature maker would go about getting hold of the pigments. And so in that image on the left-hand side, you have some core minerals, in fact, azurite and some gold and silver leaf in there, and red earth from hematite. And then on the right-hand side, I have an image from a display from the Guangzhou Museum in Guangzhou City in China, which I actually also happened to be in 2018. It was interesting to see these two displays side by side, as it were. And these are showing pigments that were very commonly used in Chinese ink making and Chinese art. You've got malachite as the green one, and azurite, again, the dark blue one. Interestingly, this is a very dark blue azurite as opposed to the much lighter blue azurite that you have in the image on your left-hand side. And if Fern would change my slide again. Oh, how much water, Alex? Just to cover it. So with the onion skins, I'll hold this up. I don't know whether you can see. Does that? I've literally just covered my skins. So a bit like cooking boiling peas and not putting too much in. So the slide here is another slide of 2 lumps of rock from the same exhibition in Guangzhou. Again, a red hematite there and a vermilion. And I'm using this slide against a wonderful early Chinese manuscript which shows the use of red vermilion here on the left-hand side of your screen. It's a very, very early drawing. It's by an artist called Zhao Yong, and it's from the mid-14th century. So comparable in date to some of the early manuscripts. In fact, it's 600 years later than the Book of Durrow, but comparable to some early manuscripts, as I'll show you in a moment. If we go on to our next slide, there are other ways of making pigments that are not to do with minerals and were made organically in other ways. And on the screen here you have this wonderful dark purple. This is a manuscript from the British Library, and the British Library has done some research onto the pigment used in the back of this, the rich purple colour in the background, and it's been made from using dog whelks. So because I'm not too far from the beach at the moment, I have some dog whelk shells here to give you a sense of their size. Tiny, really tiny. It's another one a little bit bigger, but still very, very small. And it gives you a sense of what they are by looking at this picture on the left-hand side. So dog whelk, ink from dog whelks is purple, extraordinarily, different to the indigo that you've seen in the Book of Durrow. This is a different colour of purple. And this is Tyrian purple. It was made throughout Europe. These are European dog whelks, Nucella lapillus. And the dye was actually made from the mucus from the mollusk. So the shells I've got here are just dead, they're empty. I picked them up on the beach long after their occupants had been eaten by seabirds or died a death somewhere along the way. So the pigment was made from a mucus that the mollusk excretes when it is distressed. And so in at the very early period, you could milk these shells, just bearing in mind how tiny they are, milking shells this small for a mucus, which you would boil up into a dark purple dye. Now the mucus, when it comes out, is a sort of creamy colour. And often, because the shells are so small, they didn't actually bother to try and sort of stress the mollusk to make to make the secretion. They just squashed the whole thing and used the mollusk and its secretion and everything all together. The next process was that you salted your shells, your crushed mollusks, with their key mucus that was being being excreted, and then you would boil your liquid, and after about 10 days with boiling with salt, you would have your purple or rich indigo colour. Now it took something like 12,000 of these little shells to make a dye that would trim the fur of a king's robe. So this was a very, very precious, hard to get, hard to make, lengthy thing. So I love the idea of ink from seashells, but the next one I'm going to show you is something that's a bit easier for us to make, and these are oak gall. Now on the screen now, Fern has very helpfully just changed the slide for me to show you two further instances of manuscripts that have been proven to use dog whelk purple, Tyrian purple, one from the Barberini, known as the Barberini Gospels, and another, the Durham Gospels there. So the purple ink in both these manuscripts has been tested, and although there's indigo in there as well, there is also Tyrian purple from the dog whelk shells. So if we go to our next slide, I'm going to show you something that's a bit more accessible and easier to make, although it's worth saying that this is still not vegetarian. Oak gall ink is made from these oak galls, but unfortunately your oak gall larvae is inside the gall. So this is also not a vegetarian ink that I'm making. It's a bit like having the mollusk inside its shell. We've got the larvae inside the oak gall here. If you are making some onion skin ink with me at the moment, just keep an eye that it's not boiling too hard. I'm just going to turn mine down, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So what we have on the screen now is the first example of the oak gall wasp. This is the marble oak gall wasp, because as you see, it's made this marble-ish sort of round ball attached to the acorn. And I couldn't resist putting the 17th century drawing from the Courtauld's Prints and Drawings collection on the screen beside it, because it seems that the satire has a wonderful oak leaf type design that he's looking at there. And if Fern would turn to my next slide, here we have the Nopper oak gall, and these are the ones which I've been finding most commonly around the UK. I'm in East Anglia at the moment, and I found the ones that I'm holding here just last week. So they're still very much around, and it's something that you can do at any point in the next few weeks. So the Nopper oak gall wasp is a fascinating thing, and these are actually quite a recent introduction to the British Isles. The Nopper wasp was only found in the UK in the 1960s, having come over from the continent. And there was a bit of a worry at that point about how it would affect our native oak trees, but actually there's been nothing too detrimental, thankfully, as a consequence. But what we are able to do is make our oak gall inks ourselves. So the Nopper wasp has this fascinating life cycle. It lays its eggs in the embryo of the acorn, and these eggs become larvae, and the larvae feed off the acorn during the winter, and then they hatch out of sort of vents or gills that you'll see in your Nopper oak gall pieces in the spring. So when you collect these, and I'd recommend that you dry them before you use them, when you collect these, it's worth saying that when you boil them up, they've still got the animal inside. So if you're worried about that, it is just worth making that absolutely clear. So the larvae is in the acorn right now, munching away over the winter. And it will emerge from the gall in the spring. Now all the larvae emerging from this gall will be female, and they will fly to a turkey oak, a different variety of oak, the Quercus cherris, which is an evergreen oak which was introduced to the UK in 1735. And again the process will occur, and this time with this new generation of wasps, this will produce wasps, both male and female, and then they go back and they lay their eggs back in the native oak, the Quercus ruber. So the life cycle goes from Quercus ruber to a Turkish oak and then back to the Quercus ruber again, but all these trees are growing in the UK at the moment. So if Fern could turn to my next slide. I wanted to show you some examples of the sorts of inks, the colours and the ways in which artists were drawing with them. And so I've taken a few favourites from the gallery collection. On the screen now you have Dürer's Wise Virgin, and I put up a detail beside it because I really wanted to show you the fine detail in which, the way in which Dürer has been able to use a very fine nib here and really get into the detail of the folds by cross-hatching, and the mark making in this drawing is absolutely extraordinary. If I ask Fern to turn to my next slide, we'll have to whiz through these quite quickly. Again, two favourites here, but again showing different tones of oak gall ink, and this all depends about how much you reduce your gall. So your gall process is very like your onion skin process. You would start with your oak galls and you would reduce your liquid in your saucepan, and depending how far you reduce the liquid, you'll get these different tones of brown. And if you add something called iron oxide or iron sulfate, then you would end up with a blacker coloured ink, and that might be what Parmigianino has used here in the crayfish. So if Fern turns to my next slide, Rachel talked about this wonderful Tiepolo crocodile earlier in the day, so I won't spend too much time on that. But these two images really were to show the way in which you could use ink not only with a nib, but also using it as a wash, and these drawings show that very clearly. And then my next slide, Fern. Here I couldn't resist showing you the Rowlandson, where he's an 18th century caricaturist and satirist who is comparing the faces of humans to particular animals. And then on the right hand side, a drawing by Henry Somerville, which was made after the introduction of synthetic inks. So whether this drawing is actually an iron-based gall ink, a black gall ink, or a charcoal ink, or indeed a synthetic ink, is something to be discussed another time. So if Fern turns to my next slide, here I've got a slide that shows you a little bit more about the galls. So on your far left hand side you've got the galls, and it shows you the method. You'll have boiled up your galls and then I strain them, and that's this middle slide looking a bit inky and messy. And then the image that you've got on the right hand side shows different states of boiling away. So the top walnutty brown is quite a light boil, that colour comes really straight away. The darker brown was just boiling it away, evaporating the liquid a little bit more. And then the last one was showing what happens if you add iron sulfate. Now iron sulfate is something that I buy it from garden centres. Gardeners feed it to camellias and to ericaceous acid loving plants, and so you can buy it very cheaply from garden centres in quite large quantities. So the process for the oak gall is very like what we're doing at the moment with our onion skins. So if Fern could turn my slide again. Here is a slide that's showing something about, so you should now have some onion skins looking quite like the image on the far left, the skins in the pan. It's what mine are looking like now. And the next stage, if you're ready to do this, is to filter it. So I have a jam jar, a jam funnel, and a piece of kitchen roll. But you could just as easily use a sieve with some kitchen roll or a tea towel or something in it. I just find that I'm not terribly good at pouring these things, and I get it everywhere, and sometimes they stain, which is why I've taken to using a funnel. So I'm going to pop this here so you can see what I'm doing. And so we're just going to pour our liquid through the funnel. Now, if I had more time, I would suggest that you then put a bit more hot water on your onion skins. As you see, they're here and they've still got colour in them. Yours will still have colour in them as well. So you could start the process again, put a little bit more water on the skins, boil them down, and really sort of take as much of the colour as possible out of those skins. We don't have time for that, so we're just going to work with what we have. But what you should have now is a very little deep red liquid, like the picture on the right hand side. Now you want to stick that back in your saucepan and reduce this a bit more, because if you were to try to paint with this now, you would find that it was really very watery. So I'm going to just turn mine back on again and let that bubble away. With some of the inks that I make, I find that if I boil it, I lose a lot of the colour quality, and really you just only want to simmer it. Onion skins are really quite robust, which is why I chose them for today's demonstration. And so if it boils quite hard, it's not the end of the world. So if I were to turn to, I think, what's my final slide, while our ink is just bubbling away here. This slide shows a slightly different, it's the same process, but it was a different ink. This is the ink I made from this beautiful red rose here on the right hand side, a rose called Rosa Highgrove. And it's fair to say that the ink that I got out of that rose is quite similar to the colour of the flower. That's not always the case. You can do this method with all sorts of flower materials, and you can do it with barks as well, and other tannin sort of holding quality tannin holding objects like the oak galls. So in the slides that Fern has put up now, you'll see that there is on the right hand side ink colours that come from that rose, and I was playing with both different acids and alkali to shift the colour of the ink. And you can do exactly the same with the red onion skin. So what you're making at the moment, as it's boiling down, is going to come out a bit like the colour in the middle on the left hand side where I've written red onion skin. And above it is red onion skin with lemon juice, and above it is below it is red onion skin with bicarbonate of soda. So one with acid and one with alkali. While our onion skin brew is doing, I thought I might just show you some other things. So this is an alkali. Sorry, let's get my. This is an alkali made from sodium carbonate, which you can buy on Amazon very cheaply. And it shifts the colour extraordinarily. So this here is an ink that I made earlier out of hibiscus flowers. These are sold as tea, and I bought this batch from Amazon. As you see, they're just dried hibiscus flowers. And I made this morning in exactly the same way. And you'll see, if I hold that up, it makes a beautiful red. This is hibiscus flower. and it will dry a sort of deeper purple. And if I were to drop some alkali on it, you'll see it goes green. And again, this won't necessarily last in its intensity, but in a moment that you start playing with acid and alkali, you get these very, very strong and different colours, which is really fun to play with. If I were to drop lemon juice on it, a nice sophisticated way of dropping lemon juice on it. If I were to drop lemon juice on it, it goes pinker. So immediately we've got 3 different tones from just one batch of hibiscus flower. Now, hopefully your onion ink will be reducing away. I'll give you a sense of what mine is looking like at the moment. The longer you reduce it, the more intense the colour will become. At the moment I have that sort of colour, which is fine, but if I had more time I would reduce it away to get something a bit more like the colours in that last slide I showed you. When you have the colour that you are happy with, the next stage is simply to store it. And I do that by popping it back in the jar, and you can see suddenly how much less liquid I've got. But these inks are never meant to be kept for terribly long. Now, if I wanted to store this and preserve it for a bit longer, I would put a clove in, just ordinary kitchen clove, as a preservative. And if I were worried about the way that it was flowing on the page, or I wanted to make it slightly shinier, or I wanted it to flow better, particularly if I was using a nib, then I would put a little bit of gum arabic in. And again, this is something that health food shops sell. This one, again, for me, I tend to buy these things on Amazon, but you can get them anywhere. And it's gum arabic that Sam was also using in that charcoal ink that she made earlier. So really, really useful thing to have in your cupboard. There are other ways of making ink, which I've shown you just now is an evaporation process. There are processes that are a bit more chemical, and something that you really need an adult to be around with you to explore. The materials I've used today are pretty safe apart from the heat, but bear in mind that sometimes if you are using copper oxide, it's highly, highly poisonous. So always make sure to check what you are using with your materials. I think I've rattled through that quite quickly, and I think I have a minute left. Is that right, Layla? Am I?
It is. So there's just a few questions for you.
Yeah.
Someone was asking if it's just the whole clove first.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a whole clove? Yes,
just a whole clove. So with this is oak gall ink. If I've got that much ink in a jam jar, I would use maybe a few cloves. People say different amounts, and I'm a bit sloppy about it. I would just put sort of 3 or 4 cloves in there, just to be sure.
Great.
Yeah.
And the other question, which sounds quite similar, is do you use the whole rose when you're making the ink with the rose?
So yeah, I just use the petals.
Cool.
So I pulled them off. But I also used some petals that were slightly shriveled and past their best. So not when they're brown, but you know, but if they're a bit shriveled around the edges, then yeah, I use I'll happily use those as well. And I use quite a lot of rose petals. So my pan this size would be half full of petals when I begin. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Charlotte. I feel like I have learned so much anyway today. I'm sure everyone else feels the same way. So just to say to everyone, we've recorded all the sessions as well, so you can go back and visit and see all the instructions once again, and we'll let everyone know. So just to wrap up, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining, and thank you to our artists and experts who joined us today as well. And if you wanted to send anything you made, please send it to at Courtauld Res on social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or email us at researchforumevents@courtauld.ac.uk. I hope that everyone can join us again for another Open Courtauld event. Thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.